Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, I have on with me a very special band. I have on the members of Gainesville, Florida band Spoke. I got Scott Huegel. I got Jon Resh. I got Chuck Horne. They're here to tell the story of Spoke. Guys, hello. How are you? How you doing?
Hey,
No,
Jeff. Thank you for having us on.
Yes,
We're
this
doing
is
great.
this is going to be extraordinary.
Well, it's great to have you all on. When was the last time all three of you were in a room together?
Oh, that's a good question. Golly.
Boy, you're forcing us to use our memory muscle. Uh,
Yeah.
Probably a wedding. Who knows?
No, it was probably in Chicago. It certainly, Jeff, it would have been 5 years ago at least, I reckon. So,
yeah, probably before the
um,
pandemic. I see Scott when he's in California. I'm in Chicago. Chuck's just outside of Chicago. So I see Scott and I see Chuck sort of separately, but we're all still very much in touch and yeah, all still somehow friends. And yeah, so but we don't seem to get in the sort of same room together, like physically, as much as we'd like to.
Sure.
I
It's
don't
ama-
think I've seen Scott in a while.
yeah, it's been a hot minute, mate.
hmm
wow. It's amazing how though you all have remained connected in some way over the course of all these years. So that really is a testament to the relationship I imagine that you all have built. And how long has it been since you all first met?
1984,
86,
84,
85.
84, 85. Yeah. So I
85, so
mean,
it's been
we
40.
were friends, Jeff, before we were a band, right? So we all met in high school in Florida, and we had no aspirations to play music at that time, but we were just pals. And then we all moved to Gainesville, and that's where it kind of jet started.
In high school, there was sort of a small cadre of people who were into punk rock, and looking back, they were all really fantastic people and really interesting people. And we've stayed friends with a lot of them, or at least stayed in touch with a lot of them. But yeah, I remember pretty clearly meeting Scott and meeting Chuck. And it was Scott, for you, it was 85, so that's 40 years. And Chuck, for you, it was spring of 86. I certainly didn't know then that these guys would be in my life for the next 4 decades. But
Count your blessings. Oh my
but
God.
I'm glad they are.
Did you
Yeah,
all?
Jeff,
Okay.
Chuck was in my algebra class in my sophomore year of high school. I'm not sure if either of us passed, but I think, Chuck, you were the first person I ever met when I moved to Florida, quite honestly.
Yeah, and all three of us had come to Florida from other places. And, we all had sort of like family situations that were, that had been a little fractured. There's just a lot like that was in common. And we all definitely dug the same bands. And we are all kind of, just these misfit oddball dudes. And, we were going to gravitate toward each other one way or the other. So, and
Did
we
you
lucked
guys?
out that we did.
Did you guys all move to the same part of Florida, or did you eventually get to the same location over the course of time?
Well,
Yeah,
Chuck,
we all moved to Orlando, right? So like this like very mundane vanilla suburb of Orlando, Florida, which geez, like back in the mid 80s was basically a kind of cultural wasteland, right? So there wasn't much to do for young people. And as John rightly says, anybody that was in punk rock in the mid 80s, that's a small cadre of folks. So we all did gravitate towards each other, but we all lived in the same sort of neighborhoods and, you know, um, yeah. Uh, right, Chuck? I mean, where did you come from, Chuck? Illinois.
I came from Texas,
Oh my God.
Antonio, yeah. But I had only been there for a year, but I've lived all over the country, and I moved to Altamont Springs, Florida, and met some of the kids in the neighborhood, and they were pretty cool and fun, and went to school, and a lot of normal kids, and then there was a few that stood out. And I think in algebra class, I don't know, Scott and I probably were writing band names on our folders or something.
Yep.
We kind of, I think Rush was written on one of the folders or something like that, and we started talking. And he's from the Midwest, and I'm originally from Illinois and lived in Indiana, and all my family's from Michigan. So we had some things in common and just kind of started chatting.
And
John, I don't remember meeting John right away, so I don't know. I really don't even remember meeting John.
Do you know John?
Not really.
No, no, right?
But everybody always thought in high school we had like similar haircuts.
Yeah, we kind of looked alike a little bit in high school and whatnot. It was in like a social studies class or something, and I remember you were in the back, Chuck, and I was in the back, and you were squinting. And I was like, why is this guy squinting? And because you needed glasses, as it turned out, but you never got them, I think, until maybe now.
You have the memory. I'm just in the back, just squinting.
Yeah. I remember you like doodling like these sort of satanic looking demons and stuff like that.
Great. There goes my future. Yeah.
Yeah, there goes your career.
All that.
I guess to what Scott was saying, Jeff, is that like this was, you know, the suburbs in the 80s, like Reagan 80s, where at least from our standpoint, other people are going to feel differently. Like they're going to look at it and think of it as like this sort of rose-colored John Hughes movie kind of situation. But to us, it was really like
it was weird.
It was just empty. It was vacuous. Like there was nothing. It wasn't just nothing for us to do. There was nothing. We're constantly looking for some sort of like eccentricity or idiosyncrasy or just some sort of cultural, you know, interesting fucking things to check out. And so we were very adventurous in this way, like just checking stuff out and trying stuff and whatnot. And we found this little, you know, group of people who all were sort of the same mindset. And that really, in the end, that very much got me out of the suburbs personally. But like it kind of drove me and Scott and Chuck and others to, you know, check new things out.
Did you guys ever have any concert experiences together back then?
Oh,
yeah.
Weekly.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so Florida, you know, back in the mid 80s had a real skinhead problem, right? So
Nazi skinhead.
yeah, and we were definitely not part of that. So, you know, Jeff, I don't know if you grew up in the mid 80s in Florida, but it was tough, you know. And so collectively, you know, we lived in the same neighborhoods. We would go to the same shows. There was basically like one venue in Orlando that would host. Well, there were a few, but, you know, bands when they would come through were generally, mate, you know, we have a lot of stories of just, you know, you had to stick together because it was kind of tough. But then we started, as we got older and we got our driver's licenses and a little bit more freedom, you know, we started going further afield and we would go up to Gainesville. And I can remember, you know, like, for example, to your question, like John and I drove up, Chuck, you weren't at this one, but, you know, we drove up to Gainesville to see Naked Raygun in 87, 88, somewhere around there, you know, and it was in a VFW hall.
With Trey and some people to see Naked Raygun. There were tons of skinheads that emptied out and fought and stuff. I was at that show.
Yeah, oh, you're at, I'm sorry, Chuck. Yeah, my apologies.
Scott doesn't even know me.
But yeah, it was
out of his memory for the Naked Raygun show. This was like this really seminal show, like foundational show for us. But Chuck, yeah, he didn't need to be there. Yeah, he was there. Yeah,
sorry, buddy.
Sorry.
Did all of you have cars, or was there one person that you were?
Yeah, Chuck and I did. John, I think John got his first car last year.
Yeah, that's pretty much right.
But yeah, Chuck and I did, and you know yeah. So anyway, I don't want to jump the gun. Maybe you have it poised for later on about the music side of things. But yeah.
I would say that, and that to Scott's point about like the Nazi skinheads in Florida, I mean, they were everywhere. And it's kind of a weirdly glossed over history of punk and hardcore is that it required a great deal of commitment to go to shows. Anybody will tell you this in that time, that it required all this commitment because you didn't know if you're going to end up like you know, there were people that ended up in the hospital, and you know, it was, and that's a whole like separate thing. That's its own podcast series as to why that was
Yeah.
the case and why it went away. Like it's actually a super interesting thing. But going there could be really like any like amazing rock and roll show can be really exciting, but also kind of terrifying too. And so we had to deal with that a lot. And if you look at a lot of bands that made albums during that time, like a lot of the lyrical content is, and sometimes the musical content, certainly in DC, like address that and changed and whatnot. And we had to fucking handle that shit all the time.
Right.
And it was like kind of a constant situation that we had to navigate. You know, this sort of like gang essentially that was just out to ruin other people's nights and kind of getting off on that. Great shows. We saw some really great shows. Like Chuck, what were some of the shows besides like Naked Raygun? But we saw like the shows at Rollins, the shows, you know, what did we
Yeah,
say?
what was that? Meatmen and some other bands. Yeah, I mean, we didn't just see hardcore bands. We saw lots of new wave bands. You know, we had a lot of extracurricular, like Friday nights, we might go to like Visage or some of those clubs where, you know, like gothic kids and new wave kids and dance, and we'd listen to great music. So besides just seeing bands, we were hanging out as a group, having fun, or just going to people's houses and hanging out. But as for bands, if it's hardcore stuff, I missed one of the best shows, which was SNFU, but I saw stuff like BP down in Tampa, in Orlando. Geez, we just saw, I think we've seen thousands of bands, and it was a great time. There were definitely tons of skinheads. I tried to avoid it all. I seemed to skate through that without any issues, but I know there was problems. You know, and for me, the hardcore stuff kind of broke me into like hardcore music, broke me into like, I grew up with like classic rock and easy light favorite 70s stuff. I loved all that, still do. And I love new wave music. And then I think Corey Witt and Trey and John, a few other Scott, turned me on to like Misfits and Descendants and all those kinds of bands. And so I've seen a bunch of great bands, and yeah, there were tons of problems, but I think about the skinheads about that much, you know, which is great because I just remember all the great bands and the great times that we all had, and way bigger for me. So
Anecdotally, Jeff, I remember one time somebody held a house party, right, on Halloween. And so we all dressed up in our like Bobo Halloween costumes, and Chuck came in dressed as a skinhead. And it was like one of the funniest things. Do you remember that, mate?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
shaved your head. You like committed fully to it. We were like, what? And you came in, when you came in the door, you did like that skinhead walk.
Yeah, you walked in like all like
Oh.
full skank, you know, like that was hysterical, man.
God bless
Good
you.
memory, Scott. Good memory.
I'm not remembering that, but I'll take the story, I guess, if it's humorous.
Yeah, Chuck was like King Goofball and great. I mean, he's always great to hang out with, but yeah, it was, and that was part of it too, is like being a goofball and having the freedom to kind of do, you know, goofy ass shit that was kind of frowned upon, but we just, you know, I mean, that's so much a part of punk rock is fun, right? I mean, it's so much a part of it, and the courage to have that fun. So, but yeah, I mean, and Chuck, you're totally right in that there was a lot of different stuff that we were into, and certainly like new wave and like synth pop, and certainly all the kind of post punk. For me, certainly coming out of England and whatnot, it's almost like it was so hard to get good music that we couldn't be too choosy. Like we were just into whatever we could find that was awesome. So we were like into the Cramps, and we were into Bauhaus, and we were into, you know, just kind of all these like interesting things that, you know, Chuck turned us on to Gary Newman. Like we were into kind of MTV New Wave, and like it was like whatever we could find because we are just so hungry for awesome music and awesome experiences, you know.
Yeah.
And skateboarding for me and Scott, certainly skateboarding played a huge part.
Yeah, I mean that was like
That's like another foundation.
part of the fabric of it. But in any case,
Were there a lot of skate parks that were around at that time?
zero, mate, zero.
At best,
Like,
our friends made ramps at best, but there weren't
you
even.
know, Chuck dabbled in it a bit, but John and I, that was our lifeblood. It was punk rock and skateboarding. That was it. And this is kind of sad, but that's still kind of the same because John and I still skateboard to this day.
You do a lot of
55.
Yeah.
Wow. So
idiots.
Still out there skateboarding on ramps?
Yes. Bowls, ramps,
and stuff. Yeah, it's idiotic, but we it's like it's such a key source of like bliss and sort of helps our sanity quite a bit, I think. And
as a matter of fact, Jeff, next week I'll be seeing John in Colorado because a group of us from our high school days in Florida, where we all went to high school, some of us still skateboard, and we meet up once a year for like this ridiculous long weekend where we will choose a location every year and get together and go skateboard, and we rent a house and all. It's ridiculous, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, that sounds nice though.
Yeah, the parade of dipshits on.
But yeah, I mean, skateboarding aside, I think the point is that it's unusual, but the fact that maybe it was the set and the setting of Orlando, Florida, that was a crucible for these friendships that last to this day with many of these people that we went to high school. And Chuck, John, and I are kind of just examples of that, right? And I'm legitimately grateful. Florida has it has its pros and cons, but if I could take one pro from it, it would definitely be the fact that I fomented some like long-standing friendships, and now here we are with with you. So,
were there any local bands in the Orlando scene at that time, or just Greater Central Florida that you learned about at that young age too?
Well, I mean, Chuck was the most musical one out of all of us back in those days. John, you play guitar, mate, and you were really into it, but that was a kind of solo thing, right? But Chuck was in bands. Mm-hmm. And he was, and Chuck's, I don't want to speak for you, John, but Chuck's a musician, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And
Chuck's the best of us by far in terms of skill and the fact that he has the best singing voice. And on his with his instrument, of the three of us, he's he's the most competent.
But I mean, to answer your question, mate, like local bands that people might know, there weren't many. I mean, we had the Genitortures. They were freaking awesome, right? Because it was so weird and gnarly. And Jen Zimmerman, who led the Genitortures, became like this mentor to us, which was just bananas.
Did you ever check out her radio show on Rollins College?
Oh yeah.
So, mate, Jeff, Jen Zimmerman's Rollins College show on Wednesday nights from 10 to 12 was kind of our lifeblood.
Yeah. How do you know about that, Jeff? How are you aware?
Yeah, how the hell do you know that, mate? It's like being interviewed by Nardwar.
Yeah.
You're on the Florida Sound Archive, it's all.
Oh yeah. Okay. So you're going to know. Yeah. Yeah. Chuck, what were you going to say?
I would say you two hung out with Jen. I did not, but I've heard the stories. Yeah,
pretty wild stories. But she was great.
Yeah, other bands were like Damage, which was an interesting sort of hardcore band, but they did synths, right? Like guitars.
Guitars.
Yeah. Gothic, synth, hardcore, new wave kind of sound. Very unique. I liked them.
It's kind of crazy that you mentioned Damage because Mike Brown from Damage, that's the episode that's going to follow this one.
Oh,
well, butter my toast. There you go.
So, did you ever get a chance to see Damage at all? I know they had.
Yep.
Okay,
sure.
Yeah, I liked them. Yeah, they were definitely different and doing their own thing. I think that's what I appreciated most about them. Was that I don't know of anybody really to this day that was playing like this sort of synth core, it was cool. They were fun live and whatnot. I remember seeing them, they'd play at skate contests and stuff.
Yes, they would play skate contests and they had like a skate song.
Yeah.
As well. But I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but Orlando was, and gosh, I don't want to like insult any like Orlando bands from the mid '80s, like, hey, what about us, jerk? But I can't remember. There weren't many. I mean, there were the Genital Tortures, Damaged, Declared Ungovernable.
Suburban Blight.
I mean, you're talking just
I'm sure there's others that were
closet. There were like bands that had like a following and would fill up the club some. I mean, it was a pretty good scene. Gainesville was a little different, a little bit more energetic, and like what Naomi's Hair came from Gainesville, and
there you go.
Yeah, there's the one band, and we'll talk about Naomi's Hair in a bit because that's a really, really strong inspiration for us. Like without a doubt, really unique band. But that was the first one that came to mind, was that the Orlando band that meant the most to us, I think, was Naomi's Hair. But we can talk about that as they, as kind of
that's very true. Gosh, how could I forget? There's the Riddlers. We got to say the Riddlers.
Yeah.
I like watching practice.
Did you all know about the Love Gods and Leisure Suits?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but that was a wee bit before our time, right?
Okay.
So those guys were a little bit older, and when you're 14, 15 years old, you kind of get into your own stream. And those guys, we definitely knew about them, but all those folks in that crowd was a little bit of an older crowd, so we were a little bit intimidated, or just like, nah, we don't fit in with these people. So
yeah, their songs are a little like I don't know if the humor and whatnot was a little subtle for our taste or something. I can't remember. I love that Love Gods and Leisure Suits.
Yeah, they're pretty famous, mate.
Yeah. So this would eventually segue into like. I mean, the bands that we had seen were, I have nothing but great memories of, despite Skinheads and whatnot, but like Meatmen and Ludacris and Crumbsuckers and Exploited and Gangrene, and then going to Sarasota, Chuck, is that where it was, to see BP and Dag Nasty and 7 Seconds and this sort of thing. So it was always touring bands for the most part. Life Sentence, really great shows, like in sort of like I see it as sort of a golden era of kind of punk and hardcore at this time. And then what Chuck brought up was this this club that we're still sort of mystified as to why it was like how it was operated and why the owners chose to do it, called Visage, which was an all ages club that played mostly kind of new wave and sort of synthy kind of dance music, which we all scoffed at the time and now love. So there's a lot of New Order and Depeche Mode and that kind of thing. But sometimes they'd play, like they'd throw on like, just to for the malcontents in the crowd, something a little bit harder, and we'd all go crazy and whatnot. But every shade of like youth subculture at the time would end up at Visage, and kids would drive like an hour and a half away, and they'd drive from Ocala or whatever else to go there. And it was like, you'd have punk rock folks and surfers and skinheads and like kind of hippie crusty people, and then super dance club kid, like pre-rave kind of stuff. And everybody came, and that was like to find again some eccentricity and idiosyncrasy. And there was a lot of trouble there. There was always somebody fights, ODs, somebody would be like, some girls would get in fights and like putting their cigarettes out on each other and whatnot. Every night,
clove cigarettes.
A lot of clove cigarettes, yeah. And like kids would just get drunk as hell and other drugs and whatnot. And we're looking back at the time, we thought, kind of lame, but we'll go anyway. And looking back, I'm like, this amazing place that gave us like incredible adventures and experiences. What was the business model? Like, what was the thinking behind, like, we're going to bring in all the weirdo kids and let them, and then everybody would be like, there'd be a lot of making out and,
I mean, you could do a whole podcast on this
Totally,
topic of that, because it is very odd. It would not exist today. Like, all three of us, John, Chuck, and I have kids, and they're all kind of grown up now or growing up. And, an all ages youth club, just that wouldn't exist. And all of these things that we've talked about right here have laid the foundation of what was to come with the three of us coming together for a band, right? So these are all the ingredients where it ultimately led to us being like, hey, we should do our own band.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And seeing they put on shows and seeing a lot of shows there, it like that definitely kind of gave us the inspiration to, seeing these bands that really knew what they were doing. We were like, oh, that's how you do it. And then other times just musically, like there's kind of a legendary show that happened at Visage that was Love and Rockets, who we loved, with this unknown band called Jane's Addiction opening. And this is when Jane's Addiction was really weird. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel like the consensus is Jane's Addiction just
It was kind of life changing.
yeah, it was unbelievable because they didn't quite sound like what everybody knows. It was much more abstract. It was very heavy reverb. It was way weirder, but it was unbelievable, and it was like a new sound. And yeah, and Love and Rockets were amazing as well. And a lot of stuff happened to our friends that night at that show, like lots of like good and bad. And so it's just one of those things that sort of put a it was just kind of a benchmark of sorts. It just kind of set a direction, I think, among many, many, many other things. Like life at that age when you're between 16 and 19, it's just, at least I found, is so intense and rich with different influences and experiences, and you're just going after it. So,
Was there more than just music that influenced? Were you influenced at all by movies and other types of pop culture
yeah.
and things like that?
Yeah.
I would say our our friends, we all kind of, well, John was my fan. That was it.
That's true. That's true.
Only
all
fans.
kind of were pulled together with music and art. A lot of it was artistic stuff, school art classes, movies, like cultural, pop culture type stuff. And like we would all hang out together. Like some of us go to the dollar movies. They had, dollar movie theater. Go hang out at somebody's house all night long. Maybe play some music together or go see bands. I mean, it really was like the focal point of our lives. Like we work our shitty jobs, and afterwards we'd all get together. And our most of our parents, John and Scott's parents, are a little bit maybe a little stiffer than mine. Mine, just kind of let me do what I want. I wasn't out really causing any problems, and was kind of just out. And I'd be out late and go see bands or do whatever, and it was never a problem. But I think if I was going to sum up the mid '80s Orlando scene, was that kids were kind of bored and looking for things to do. And one thing was entertain yourselves and get together in groups and entertain each other. And it was going to some club that maybe we didn't really want to go to, but we go and have some fun or hang out at somebody's house. I mean, stuff that was happening all around the country. It wasn't like this was only happening in Orlando, but it was like, to me, when I lived there and moved in the mid '80s to Orlando, it was growing. It was starting to grow. All the orange groves were becoming like apartment complexes and all that. And there were neighborhoods and stuff, but it's not like it is now where it's just like totally populated. So we were always looking for some type of fun, some sort of way to hang out and do stuff. And for us, easily, I would say it was music. Definitely movies and other things. It all is a part of our relationships and our personalities. And I only wanted to throw this in there because I can't remember who took me to the show. My first hardcore show was in Sanford, and it was UPS, Useless Pieces of Shit, and Brutal Assault, and Declared Ungovernable. And I went in there, and yes, there were tons of skinheads and other things, but I was just like open to a whole new world of, wow, what is all of this? I was so used to like new wave music and stuff like that all of a sudden I was seeing people knocking each other all over the place and fights, but the music had the energy I'd never experienced before. It was fast and loud, and I was like, this is a good introduction to a different lifestyle. And I think in Orlando at that time, that's what people were seeking. So they were either hanging out at the mall or skateboarding or hanging out with friends and creating problems. So I think we're all pretty well behaved for the most part. So.
Yeah, I mean, we get ourselves in some trouble that we would and wouldn't, sort of pay the price for. But The only thing I'd add to that, and Chuck, that was a really great summation of it. And the only thing I'd add is like a lot of, teenage boys, there was a lot of energy expended toward like chasing girls, a lot of like, and that was kind of, an aspect of it too. But the way that we found a lot of our peers that weren't into this sort of subculture would kind of fill that boredom with was like just being obsessed about beer and being drugs and everything else. And that just wasn't so much like it just wasn't so much our scene. And there was more adventure to be had, kind of creating something crazier and new and, and a little bit, maybe a little bit more intense. And there were also girls at the time.
But yeah, Chuck brought up this point, Jeff, that I think, you previously mentioned that you wanted to sort of bring up, but talking about first shows, because first shows for anybody that ended up being in a band, everybody remembers it. And even if you weren't in a band, you're going to remember your first show. And so I didn't know, Chuck, that was yours. That's interesting. And, I had moved to Florida when I was 15. I'd done my freshman year in high school in Michigan, just outside Detroit. And at that point in time, I was just like heavy metal kids, like Motley Crue and Iron Maiden and stuff. But I remember in '84, that's still kind of early days when punk rock had some fangs. And there was like this group of maybe a dozen punk rock kids in my high school in Detroit. And I remember looking at them and just being like, man, I don't know what that is, but I'm interested, right? Because, that just looks a little bit more, that looks a bit cooler than all these kind of hair metal stuff. And I started kind of hanging around the fringes of them. And then eventually one day, in some class, this dude slides this cassette over to me. He's like, "Hey, man, it seems like you want to check our music out or something like that." And he gives me this cassette tape, and on one side was Minor Threat, and on one side was Suicidal Tendencies. And I'm just looking at it as if it's like some sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of treasure. I'm just like, what is this going to be
exactly.
like? And I got on the bus going home, and I put it into my Walkman, with the freaking foam headphones. And I remember from the freaking first few notes, I was like, oh my God, I'd never heard anything like it. Number one, it was very fast. Number two, there were a lot of swear words. And number three, I was like, my parents would definitely not like this music. So I was like, whoa, I'm in. And then my folks split. And we ultimately moved to Florida, and that's, and so, going to Florida, and at this point I had some sort of beginning stages of a mohawk, and I, wore skate shirts and stuff. And then, met guys like Jon and Chuck, but then there was the like punk rock, females, like women, girls. And long story short, I got invited. I don't know why or how, but I'm eternally grateful to, there was this woman named Kristen Terabesi, who invited me along to go see X, the Los Angeles band X. And Jeff, I'm not making this up. They played at Disney World. And it was like band night at Disney World. So you're like, what the, I was like, okay, I don't care. And we, and they played at the stage at Tomorrowland. It was so weird, but like, I was just like, wow, whatever. And so we go, and just like Chuck said, it was like an indoor venue. And if you put all of the Disney stuff aside, which is absolutely surreal and absurd, as soon as I walked in, just the ferocity once that band started, and the energy, and then people, this is back in the day, like old school slam dancing, not like mosh pits and stuff. I was just like, I have found my people. I have found my people. Like, there was no looking back after that. I was all in. And, it was, it was life-changing. And that's where it all started. Holy cow. Wow. Yeah. And anecdotally, just a few years ago, John Doe, who lives kind of local out here from X, was playing a solo show at a club, kind of a small club near my house. And I went along to see him, and I went out in the back of this bar to the beer garden. And, this is why, like, the divine works in such wonderful ways. I go out there, and there's nobody out there except John Doe, And I tell him the whole story, hey, my first show was you guys back in '85 at Disney World. And, you won't be surprised to hear he actually remembered that show because they played, I don't know, thousands of shows, but that one, that probably isn't going to forget. But yeah, so there you go, Jeff. We were talking about first shows and stuff, and I don't want to hog the thing, but yeah, that was it, man. I was in.
I'm glad you added that coda, Scott, because I was going to suggest that, and that he was like, didn't he say like, oh yeah, that was a weird one or something like that?
Yes, he's like, yeah, I remember that show.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's great to hear some of these stories because it is those moments that I feel help set the tone for what's to come. And I imagine that was just the beginning because you would get into so much more, especially as the band, or really as you guys made that transition further north to Gainesville. What year about did you all move?
Well, I had moved first because I got into UF, and so I moved in the summer of '88. And I had a couple of really great friends in going to UF, and that's one of the reasons that I moved there. I was kind of aware of the punk scene in Gainesville a little bit because I'd gone up a couple times before then. One of them was, to see Naked Ray Gun, and it was just an unbelievable show, unbelievable. I mean, still among it, certainly in the top 10, probably top 20 for sure, and of the thousands of shows that I've seen. And getting there, like, I was like, oh, this is definitely not like the scene that I knew with my friends. And it was a much more, it's a little hard to describe. And this was before Scott and Chuck came, and I had pals and I made lots of friends there and whatnot, but there definitely was for our circle a kind of a all for one for all feeling, and a kind of and very sort of forward looking. We were really hungry about new bands. So like when this, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but when this band that came around called Faith No More that just had this like one single called We Care a Lot, we were really interested because it was a new sound and these new kind of they were sort of blending different things. That just didn't seem to be the case in Gainesville. They seemed to be kind of locked into their sort of separate things, which wasn't like a bad thing, but it was definitely more, it was kind of a little bit more of kind of a hippie punk vibe. There's a lot more drugs.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, to me, the thing that, and Scott and Chuck may remember this, but the thing that really summed up the Gainesville scene is every show you went to just reeked of patchouli. At least
Yes.
at least
This was the part.
and I'm like, why is this? And patchouli smells like shit, it's awful. It's like this, kind of deadhead hippie smell. And I'm like, why are we at a hardcore show or whatever? And it's, there's so much patchouli, but it was that kind of scene. It was very kind of just a much more organic, loose,
I'm thinking earthy.
Yeah, it was very earthy.
Yes.
Thank you. Perfect descriptor. And not to say there weren't great bands, and there weren't bands that were really tight.
Agreed.
They really were. And I mean, my favorite by far was this band, the Doldrums.
Yeah.
Were just an absolute force, incredibly good. One of the most like underrated bands that I know of after, all these years, after 45 years of listening to this music, the Doldrums still are among like the very tops in terms of just like not just Florida bands, but any band that like just fucking like just were so intense and so tight and so good and merging this kind of music. It's almost like somewhere between, I don't know, how do you get it? It's like equal parts like Motorhead and like, I don't know, at the time would be like Husker Du or something like
Yeah, it's very melodic, and it was different. And I used to come up to visit John, right? Because I was going to community college at the time down in Orlando because I wasn't smart enough to get in UF out the gate. And
we got there. We eventually got there.
They'd take anybody at that point. But I I remember the first time I went up there, and my first experience with patchouli, I didn't know what it was, right? But I remember I was like, John, and I'd stay the weekend, and we'd go to see a show, and I'd be, what is that freaking smell up here? Oh my God. But yeah, it just seemed like it wasn't our scene at that point in time. And John is right, there were great bands, but it just seemed a little like Chuck said, earthier. There's definitely a lot more drug use, a lot more like heavy, like, hey, let's drink King Cobra and stuff, and that wasn't really our jam, right? We were just, I don't know, that just wasn't our thing. We weren't like party guys. And then, for me, and then I'll pass it over to Chuck. Well, actually, Chuck plays into this pivotally. I eventually move up to UF. I finished community college in Orlando and move up. And that's kind of when it started, Jeff. Like John and I started thinking about, if I'm remembering it right, John, like, you were playing guitar at that point, like heavy. And we were always, like, oh, maybe we should start a band. It almost like in reaction to, hey, this is not really our scene. But John played guitar. I didn't play any instrument, Jeff. So, and
you were playing that. You were like,
no, I didn't. You taught me how to play bass. You taught me. No, look, I just wanted to be in a band, and we figured we could get Chuck up there. And the only instrument left was bass. So I'm like, well, all right, that seems like, and thank God, because, it had only 4 strings. So, which is still trouble with. So I moved up, and then Chuck, if I'll pass it to you to see how you remember how we got you up there, because I distinctly remember, and it's a very romantic kind of mythologized tale in my mind, but how do you remember us getting you up to Gainesville?
Well, I was in Orlando and poor as shit. I lived with Jack in a little, I don't know if he even had a bedroom, like maybe a 1-bedroom apartment. And I was working in a video store, and I was just kind of struggling. And you guys reached out to me. Did you give me the cassette at that point with the songs where it just had bass and guitar? And I was like, I think I could do this. I don't think I had a drum set yet. You came down and got me. And you kind of saved me, because I don't know what I was doing in Florida, in Orlando, I should say, at the time. I was just kind of struggling. And we moved my mattress, my record collection, all the stuff in your car, went up Interstate 4, stuck in traffic, 100-degree weather, humid as you know what. And we're like,
yeah, my car overheated. And we had to drive with the heat on.
This is the hell ride. We got all my belongings in the car, and we're stuffed in there. But it was like, we're going up, and there's a house party at John's house that night. And we're starting a band, and it was like the world just went, opened up for me. And, I wasn't super into the kind of music that you guys were, that you liked and listened to. Like you guys like Embrace and some of that Discord stuff. I liked some of it. I did. I liked metal, and I liked rock, and I liked some of the hardcore stuff. But I was like, maybe I can do something with this. I mean, I'm not a skilled drummer. I don't have any training. I don't know how to read or write music, but I'll beat stuff. I learned drums on a Charles Chips can and a plastic bucket with, sticks. And I played with my friends in Orlando. We played songs and sang, and it was just all very loose and great time. But I didn't know what I was doing. So when I listened to their music, I was like, okay, I think I could try to do it. And we went up there that night, and the party was great. Met some people, and I met this great girl, Christy. We started practicing at her house, right? Didn't we?
It was at PJ's house.
Okay, PJ and Chris's house. And how did I even get that drum set? I don't remember.
Mate, again, this is many years ago, Jeff, but I recall you having one, and we moved you up with it. And the only reason I remember that, Chuck, is because as you rightly say, right, the car was overheating on the I-4, and I looked back, and all I could see was you in the back seat with a cymbal like kind of covering your face, and we're all sweating.
I feel like it was a mattress. I don't know. I feel like I bought Todd Campisi's drum set.
However that happens, right? But yeah,
I don't think I had a drum set. And you guys moved me up there, and we're going to get a drum set, and we're going to started practicing at these girls' house. And they're very normal people, and they're listening to these 3 guys that didn't know at all what we're doing, and we're trying to play these songs. And maybe to them it was kind of exciting, and I'm sure their neighbors hated it. But we're trying to kind of listen to the parts and and that's what we did our entire time, was we just We just play some parts and just keep playing it into the ground until we remember it, and then we make some other parts, and it just all kind of just happened. It worked out well, and maybe it was something slightly different for Gainesville, music-wise. I don't know. I mean, I just thought this is three guys having fun. We were all, friends from high school. We're just doing our thing, and it, for the most part, was accepted pretty well. We played at a party, we played at some shows, and people clapped and didn't throw things at us. And we're like, okay, let's keep doing this. Let's have fun.
Well, they sometimes do things at.
Yeah, well, but yeah, best years of my life, no doubt about it. And
that's awesome.
Gainesville was very open-minded, very friendly people.
This is true.
I was there, and it was awesome. So they, and my life suddenly was 75% better than it was.
So Jeff, when we to what Scott was talking about bringing Chuck up, I very much remember this as well, because we chose to take, for whatever reason, the highway instead of 441 up, and Scott's car starts overheating, and Chuck's records. He was Chuck in the middle, and he was surrounded by all his records. There's hundreds of records in the back seat, and we had to turn on the heater to let some of that heat out from the engine, and it was just like a 98-degree day as it was, so we were boiling, and all we could think about was saving Chuck's records. Like, this was the problem.
Yeah, that's right.
We were just like, I hope they don't melt. We were all concerned about Chuck's records, but so that was, and then we finally got up there, and when we started practicing, Chuck, at PJ's place, it was like this very kind of normie, fucking, like, apartment complex, sort of on the outskirts a little bit of Gainesville, or just on the, not in the student ghetto where we were. And I mean, the amount of not just noise, racket, like cacophony, but incompetent noise. Like, we were trying to figure out what we were doing. So it just must have sounded like hell. But I mean, I love that. I mean, we're totally grateful for them to have us there. I will say that some of the things that preceded Chuck and Scott coming there was to Gainesville was, like I said, there were great bands already. Like there's this band Motley Chicks, and I love this band Target Practice that was sort of like a Johnny Thunders kind of Dead Boys sort of feel about with a female singer. But there was a feeling that things kind of could happen, that they could move forward. Doldrums had sort of been the drummer and guitarist had merged with our friend Brent and created this band Stabilizer, and they were a huge inspiration for me to see that, like, I'd never be able to play guitar like Russ from Stabilizer and Doldrums. He was one of the best guitarists I've ever known, but I could see how they were putting it together. Some friends had just started a band called the Jeffersons that were like a just amazing Ramonesy kind of garage band, and they were good friends, and I could see how they were putting it together. And then I met Var from No Idea, who became like one of my best friends in Gainesville, and he was very he was very kind of savvy about what was going on in different scenes around the country. And so what you had was in DC, all the stuff with Discord and Positive Force and how they had been making things throughout the 80s. So I visited DC a couple of times, stayed at Positive Force, and I really tried to learn that. My dad lives in Berkeley, and so I'd be able to go out to Gilman Street and see, like, I saw Operation Ivy's last show in a very young Green Day, and I think it was maybe their first show after they named themselves Green Day, after Sweet Children. And I'd see, like Neurosis open for Mr. T Experience, like all these crazy bills and whatnot. And I'd see how they were putting it together, and come back, and Var and I would talk about it and what that sort of might look like. And I think Var was really thinking sort of kind of structurally about what it took, and I was just thinking about the music and my friends and stuff. And suddenly, when Scott and Chuck came up at the same time, that sort of invited a lot more of our friends from Orlando, which was really important to us, because suddenly we had like a support system. And at the same time, for whatever reason, all these kids came up from Miami and from Tampa, and we were all into the same shit. We were all all into the same. It wasn't just the same music; it was the same mindset. There was like different levels of like drug intake, different levels of like just being aggro or being super laid back or whatever. But we were all like immediately kind of pals, and we had our sort of base of operations in different punk houses that were all sort of close by each other, including where we lived, which wound up being called Spoke House in the student ghetto. And it all arose like very, very quickly. And everybody
Yeah.
was in bands, everybody was making zines, everybody was like trying to do something interesting together. It was all together. Now, I was friends with a lot of the old guard, and they were again they're a little bit more, earthy, a little bit more haggard about things, a little bit more cynical. And they were like, "What the fuck? Who are candy ass motherfuckers coming up and like just like infiltrating like all the shows? Like why is the Hardback Cafe lousy with all these young bastards like who are bringing this poppy ass sound and whatnot?" And yeah, so it was strangely we were just part of a coincidental kind of I don't mean movement in like a big political movement way, but just a movement of people to Gainesville that were very like-minded, and we were just sort of among those.
It was like a fertile time and like totally right place at right time kind of thing. And, again, sort of serendipity, right? And that influx of all these kids that were kind of like-minded, as John said, and this whole interview is kind of like Rashomon, right? So everybody has this sort of telling the tale from a different angle. But, when we first got together, I remember in my mind thinking, our goal, let's just try to like put some shit together and play a show. Yeah. So everything in Spoke was just based on these incremental little things. We never had aspirations for nothing except we were like, let's play a show, because here in Gainesville, there's these venues that'll let us do that. Because in Orlando, it was a little trickier, right? Because it was a little more professional. Whereas in Gainesville, it seemed a bit loose. Like, yeah, we could probably do this here. So let's do this. And we approached it, Jeff, very different from what we saw from how other bands approached it. We never jammed. Like, practice for us was like work. It was like, we were kind of mathematical about it. Like, okay, we're going to work on this song, and we weren't fucking around. And we would, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that certainly I wasn't a very good musician, right? So we had to really focus. And, I remember we were in this very normal apartment. And I remember the first song we worked on, which was a song called Sculpture. And John showed me, I'm like, what note do I play? And he's like, put your finger here. And I'm telling you, that's how it happened. I'm like, okay. And, we were doing this. And at the same time, we were living in this house. So we moved, Chuck moved in. John was there first. And this house, which became the Spoke House, which is, kind of part of the Gainesville lore. When John first moved in, there were like some normal people, because there was like 6 apartment units, broken up into this old sort of, southern home. And over time, more and more of us dipshit punk rockers from Miami, Orlando, Tampa moved in, and we took this place over, and it became the Spoke House. And so now at this point in time, John, Chuck, and I are living there. So we would go and we'd practice at this normal person's house, and then we'd come back to this house. So we were like this collective unit all the time. And then eventually, after practicing, I want to say we actually practiced 2 to 3 months, maybe. John and Chuck, I don't know if you'd agree. And then we finally get our first show, because that's pretty easily done. And we were freaking amazed that we get this. And John is a very, very talented graphic artist. And you remember back in the day, like flyers were a big deal. And John put a lot of time into all of our flyers. And he comes up with the flyer for the show. And we looked at it just like, holy shit, man, this is happening. Like, we won the freaking lottery, dude. We're gonna play a show. And I'll stop talking there so that like the other guys can jump in. But
one question: was our first show the one where you donated cans?
No.
Okay.
No.
Was it with Al Kazadik and was
no?
it
Our first show is with the Youngies.
Youngies, right? Yeah, which was a great
Who are
band.
another band that were like really instrumental in being inspirational, and they were kind of a Ramonesy Stooges kind of. They cover "I Want to Be Your Dog" and whatnot, and just the nicest guys, like the
Yeah.
nicest guys in the world. And they were like, "Hey, come, oh, you're in a band, come play at our show." And we were like, oh, we were completely like honored. And they were good. They were like good at what they did, and they didn't last that long. But I really liked them, and they were just such cool guys. And yeah, to your point, Scott, about like that there were venues, is that like, I mean, there were some kind of fly by night places and whatnot that we played like our early shows at. But I mean, the Hardback Cafe was like, you ask anybody in Gainesville and also kind of around Florida, it was like our CBGBs, and they let anything fly. Like they let anything go. Like
They weren't particular.
yeah, and a lot of crazy, crazy shit happened at Hardback. And God bless Alan, who
Yep.
opened it for, I mean, he was a good guy who was fair to people, and he had a really
Yep.
like, he had a temperament for it that I sure as hell wouldn't have. That like he didn't seem easily phased, and he was always like super great to us and everybody that I knew. And Hardback, like I can't say enough great things about Hardback, because some of the best shows, not only some of the best shows I've ever seen were there in this little club, but um, unexpectedly the best shows. You just go in for $5 on a Tuesday night and see who's playing, and it it would be like, I mean, a really great example is Rocket from the Crypt's first tour, when they were completely in red suits, all their instruments were red, all their amps were red, and they just open up with, I think, French Guy or one of those early songs. And I mean, like, I feel like that was one of the shows that I was like, okay, Spoke could do better. Like it was just so damn good. And I would also say, just to point out that Scott, he has a talent on the bass that he is masking, because
Yeah, right.
you learn so fucking fast, dude. You learn so fast, and you got it down solid. And we when Scott says it was work, I think it was just very intentional. It was very deliberate, but it was fun
Yeah.
as shit. Like we had a great
Oh
time.
yeah. No, don't get me wrong. It didn't feel like
Like,
drudgery.
yeah,
No,
and we'd always get into some fucking hijinks, because that's just sort of who we were while we were practicing. There's always something crazy that would be going on, and yeah, I have a lot of great memories of goofball practices, as a lot of bands do. But as he said, we didn't jam. And then when you go back to Spoke House, I mean, a lot of wild shit happened at Spoke House too. I mean, it was just, I think that's a big thing that, in my memory, and you guys tell me how you feel, but both because we were constantly looking for what we thought was kind of interesting and, unusual shit, and also because we're a little bit magnets for it at the time. Like crazy shit, wild shit was just constantly around us. It was constantly happening. And like it's just like one story after another. And as in our September years here, in our middle age, we don't quite get that as much, and we're not going for it as much, for the really adventurous, interesting, crazy things. But I don't think we're magnets for it as much as well. But when you set yourself up with a band and kind of a sketchy practice situation, and playing whatever clubs you want, and then a sort of base of operations where you all live, and then just checking out the craziest, goofiest stuff you can, because that's where your drive is, as it was in high school. Yeah, interesting. A lot of interesting things will happen, even if you're not a very good band, as we, kind of, we weren't, but we did our best, and we really pushed ourselves to see what was out there.
I'm going to throw in 5 cents.
Yeah.
We worked really hard. We weren't sophisticated in any way whatsoever. John and Scott would do their school stuff all day, and I'd work until the night. I'd close at my job. They'd pick me up with equipment in the car. We'd load it. Well, we wouldn't load it. I would get in the car. We'd drive to the warehouse space that we didn't rent from. There was an open space that was all dark. Did it have electricity? It had to have, or
It had
It did.
electricity, but
But it was
again,
like,
we didn't rent from it, Jeff. Like it was just some open space that was sort of willed to us by the Jeffersons, this great band, and they're like, "You guys want it? We're going to another. I think they're going to another. I'm not sure what their situation was. We're like, sure, like a free space. That sounds great, but it meant we had to bring all our shit in the car there and all our shit back every time, and we practiced multiple times, many times a week.
well, we practiced in the dark with metal bands next to us that were louder, like 10 times louder than us. We had little amps, and we would just work so hard to write these songs or practice them. And when we'd be done, it'd be like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, load the shit back in the car, drive back to the house, all that, and repeat our days. And we would do it all the time. And we practiced hard. So, yeah, we weren't like sophisticated, and we weren't doing anything new that people really hadn't heard before, but we had an energy and a funness to us that people liked and enjoyed. So our shows were kind of fun. And then, over the years of playing, we started to get a little bit better. Like our songs were maybe slightly like 10 seconds longer, or maybe a couple more changes. But everything that we heard from other bands, we absorbed it like sponges. And I think, weren't you both in Europe one summer?
Yes.
And you came back, and I had been listening to some bands that Helmet and Nice Strong Arm, stuff like that had like these songs that like kind of just kicked in. And I was like, well, what if we do something that just kind of kicks in? That would be what? Antihistamine? Kind of
Yes.
proof from that. So
Yeah.
like whatever we listened to band wise, even if it was something like a sound, like a shoegaze band or something like that, we were like, can we kind of put some of that in this and kind of work it around? And so we just kind of came up with some songs, and if it was a crappy song, maybe we'd scrap it, but I don't remember us scrapping too many songs. It almost seemed like
Better or worse, yeah.
recorded. We started
and that's the thing, like Chuck, man, like, we were a little different from other Gainesville punk rock bands, right? Because Chuck added a different element to us, right? So all three of us weren't on the same musical sort of page, right? Chuck liked a whole pantheon of music. Jon and I are a bit more singular, and ultimately that added to our sound because we had a different kind of, we were a punk band, sure, but we had a lot of different sounding songs, right? So we didn't play it straightforward like a band like Radon, who were just freaking fantastic, but they had a very singular Radon sound, right? Which
Which is amazing.
Better than ours, but and ours was more varied, but that appealed to people, right? Because they're like, wow, these guys are kind of different. Like we were definitely unified though in the interest of melody, right? Because the one band that we could all meet on was Husker Du. And man, that was kind of a driving force, right? And so, like Chuck brought out Helmet, that came in, and if I think about it, sorry, carry on. What did you say, Chuck?
I was saying the influences affected us, so a little bit of everything kind of thrown in there. But yeah, I mean, you guys had a lot of Husker Du. For me, a lot of this like simple rock stuff kind of was in my brain, so that maybe I introduced that. Scott. Yeah,
Thin Lizzy, man. Thin Lizzy. Like, talk about Thin Lizzy, Chuck, because you guys are Lizzy fans of the
he's probably got a limit on the Zoom thing. You can't,
All right, so Jeff, this is going to be a Thin Lizzy podcast for the rest of this episode.
No, but what I was saying is like, how Scott was, kind of belittling his bass talents and things like that. Scott, just put your hand up for a second.
Oh, my God. Dude, look at them. It's like sausage fingers.
And when he played bass, he was solid. That's the one thing, Scott, he didn't mess up very much, and he was really rock solid. So for me playing drums, it was super easy to play with him, and that's cool. I mean, I wasn't in rain sanction. I didn't need to, figure out all the crazy stuff that was going on, although that would have been awesome. And I always loved Jon's guitar playing. There was, there was, lots of different sounds in it that appealed to me. So when I joined these guys, the first couple songs are kind of straightforward, and to me it sounded like, I don't know, like Bad Religion or some of those kind of bands that I'm not super into. I mean, I like, Suicidal Tendencies, Dag Nasty, the bands you mentioned earlier, but it was just kind of straightforward. And we just slowly but surely started to kind of get a little bit more experimental, and they kind of accepted like, oh, Chuck can sing this song, and maybe that's kind of a soft song that we can kind of take a break from these other songs. And by the time 3 years later, those songs weren't sounding so much like our first few songs. And so there was progress. We evolved some, and we played with tons of bands that influenced us and listened to our friends play bands, and that influenced us as well. But Scott was solid, Jon was solid, and I screwed up a lot when I was playing, and I probably drank some beers here and there that got me sloppy. But we would get through our show.
Remember those times?
It would be a fun time. Yeah, people weren't seeing us to say, "Wow, they were tight." We were never tight. We were just a fun time.
Did you guys record a demo tape?
Yeah. So Jon, bless him, that's how it kind of started with the recording. So we played that show, Jeff, right? And I remember, and Jon, I'll let you take over because you're the one that engineered that whole demo tape, right? Which took us on the next path. But when we played that first show with the Youngies, we got onto that stage and I was shitting myself. But at the same time, I was stoked. I was super excited. Like, man, this is it, dude. This is all we wanted to do is play a show. Like our whole lives, we've loved punk rock so much and music and now we're part of it, which is, the beauty of punk rock, like, hey, we can do this. You can do this. And there we were on the stage and it didn't suck. Like I remember, we weren't great or whatever. Any band's first gig, is going to be a bit ropey, but there was a moment, there were moments where I could feel there was this connection with the crowd. And that's what, for me personally, was always the interesting driver. It wasn't about being on stage or anything. It was that communication between yourselves and the audience. And we had, what we lacked in musicianship, we made up for in trying to connect with the audience, because we realized, man, we ain't gonna make it on our own musical chops. So let's get the audience on our side. So that was like kind of a spoke philosophy that we would do all sorts of things to engage with the audience. And some of it was like goofery, like jackassery. Like we would throw ramen noodles into the crowd, or we'd invite people to come up and smash a Casio keyboard. But whatever we did, or opening bands, people are going to be there and they'll be like 6 feet back from the stage, right? And so that's, for a band that sucks, right? Because there's this distance, there's definitely no connection. And I don't remember where we learned it from, but we saw somebody, or maybe one of us came up with it on our own. We would say to the crowd, hey guys, we're all friends here, let's take one step forward. And so the crowd would kind of laugh and they would do it. They'd be like, okay, one more. And by the end, what we would do is we'd get them up to the front, and now the crowd was on our side, regardless of how kind of amateurish we were, especially in the early days. If you got them on your side, then there was this magical connection and this communication. Don't get me wrong, we had some shitty shows where there definitely wasn't any connection, but we had a lot of ones where there was. And that was such a powerful feeling. It was better than any feeling that I've ever had in my life, and probably will ever have, that communion between you and the crowd. So,
question though, do you think we would have been able to do this in Fort Walton Beach?
No.
We would have done it in Naples. I mean, Gainesville was like a melting pot at the time. It was perfect timing, as you mentioned earlier. It worked out great. Now, you had mentioned, you had sent me some songs, and I have this cassette right here.
Oh my God.
Jon gave me. Oh. And it's got here Spoke Practice Session #1, Sculpture for Regeneration.
Oh my God.
Poppy song in like some sort of parentheses. Chord
I feel
song,
emotional.
Minimalist song, Blackhead. Couldn't tell you what that is. Muse, Stitches, Homecoming. And then there's one that's asterisk, songs not yet named. Who knows what that became? But and he's got some songs on here that he wanted to kind of influenced me, like listen to this, and this is some ideas. He's got Government Issue, Jaded Eyes, Big Drill Car, Jawbox, Bitch Magnet, Snuff, which Bitch Magnet ended up being one of my favorite bands, Jawbreaker, X, Year One Live, Buddy Holly, Ride, Billy Bragg. So, it's not like going from Sha Na Na to, Slayer, but it's close. It's got variety, and it's like Jon and Scott were saying, hey, Chuck, listen to these songs. Maybe you can do something with it. And I listen to it, and I'm kind of in my head going, And this was like what started it. So this is what started.
That's awesome. You have that, dude. I love that
Wow.
you have that.
You rule, Chuck.
I feel like
Jesus.
we are a midpoint between Sha Na Na and Slayer. I think that pretty much sums us up. So just
I would agree. I would
Yeah.
agree.
And here's another cassette that I have live at demo, club demo.
yeah, club demo,
Yep.
right?
8-track recordings and our demo tape and all that. I remember when we were doing the demo that we did with VAR up in your shower, Scott.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the bathroom, because that's where the acoustics were better.
This Jeff. This leads to the point about the demo tape. It was done in my shower.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was
At the time we were like, this sounds great. This sounds, it revitalized us and it's so great. And when I did that Just a Thought song and I ended the song, VAR hadn't really heard something like that before, where like a vocal track here where I was singing along with myself and then I kind of went down like
Yes.
register thing. I don't know. I was just singing, but he was so used to listening to like punk rock stuff where maybe melodic stuff wasn't quite in there as much. So us not knowing what we're doing, it just kind of came out. And so it went over pretty well. And I think that time our band was hitting at the right time. If we would have hit 2 years earlier, people would have been like, get out of here, or I don't know, or in a different town. But Gainesville, as long Scott, John, you mentioned that maybe some of the older folks are kind of like, who are these guys? Get out of here, go back to Orlando and all that. But everybody was super friendly and open and warm, and the town just welcomed us. And then all of a sudden, there were a bunch of people our age all coming up there, and they had some music skills, and they formed bands. And next thing you know, we're playing lots of shows where there are 3 or 4 bands for $5, and everybody's having the time of their life, and everybody became friends, and there's house parties. It was perfect. It was great. And yeah, I miss it.
And then VAR came in, and John, you should talk about, because that's like the next stage, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, what Scott and Chuck are talking about is we really were like the 3 of us as this band spoke were really the result of the support of everybody else. I mean, we would have been making music and no matter what, but we were definitely propelled by the fact that I think everybody just wanted a good night out. I still maintain that the reason they came to Spoke shows was kind of for the music, but mostly because they wanted to see each other and they wanted to jump around. And this was just sort of some background noise for them to jump around too. And it became very clear to me and to Scott and Chuck, we'd seen so many bands at that point that was fascinating. Those bands, and you can still sort of segment in this way, the bands that were really good, that had incredibly entertaining between song banter, and the bands that were really good that didn't. Now, we weren't really good, but we were like, I bet this between song banter capability seems underrepresented. And this is where we can shine. Like, this is where if we bring a little bit of comedy and a little bit of showmanship and a little bit of gimmicks, it can go a really long way. And so people kind of came, I feel like, and I was told this, to sort of see like what the hell were these guys?
What stupid shit are they going to do tonight?
Yeah, what stupid shit are they going to be up to? And it was okay. I don't want to sound like I'm patting our backs or whatnot, but I think the only real capability we had was to like laugh together with the crowd. Like we just had a lot of fun, and other bands were doing that as well, and it was just so like seamless. It was so natural, and we get fucking heckled like crazy. I don't want it to make it sound like we're like these like we're like, I don't know, like who, Richard Pryor or something, who's just owning the audience like with their comedy prowess. It's like they were given back just as hard as they were just as funny as we tried to be, and so it was just like a great energy because of it. And I think that was a big part of why there was so it was that we had so much fun, and why things seemed to like grow at such a clip, And I will say, some of those older folks that I mentioned previously, in the older folks is a weird way to put it, because we're talking like 24-year-olds, but who are part of the earlier scenes, like some of them definitely like just jumped right in and came right along.
Yeah.
I like this stuff too. So I don't, and there was a lot of great things happening in those before sort of our time as well. But one of the things that was just huge for me, because it's already come up, is just the two enormous inspirations, like, I mean, really enormous inspirations that were close at hand for me, and I think for Scott and Chuck, but you guys can say so, is the fact that first of all, Naomi's Hair had moved to Orlando and became an unbelievably good band, as good a live band as I think existed in the
The band that should have been.
the band that should have been. They took sort of, and for those, I mean, I would imagine folks that would listen to this may not know Naomi's Hair, but as a sort of shorthand, they were kind of like a more high energy, more punk rock, sort of more heavy at times, like REM mixed with Minutemen and maybe a little Replacements. Okay. But live, they were unbelievable. And I've still seen very few bands that kind of played this sort of brand of rock and roll that definitely wasn't straight up punk rock, but was as like intense and explosive as punk rock in sort of more of an REM kind of framework. I've never, I mean, I think I've seen Naomi's Hair like maybe at least a dozen times, maybe two dozen, I don't know, many, many times. And to see them, we got to know them a little bit and we played with them, which was just an enormous honor. And it was funny because when they played with us, we played with them. It was kind of a punk crowd in Gainesville, and some of them just didn't quite get there for Naomi's Hair, but we sure as hell did. And those shows were amazing and intense, and I still think about them sometimes.
I know one show you guys did do with Naomi's Hair was also with Denature at the Covered Dish. Do you remember that show?
Yeah, that's crazy that you would remember. How do you know that? This is very Nardwar.
Nardwar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I even remember this. Again,
Yeah, that's what's the nature. Yeah, those were good guys too. Yeah.
Because they were also an Orlando band.
Right. They're an Orlando band. They played,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and they played sort of in kind of like a Jawbreaker sort of realm. Kind of that was like just that sort of moment of melodic post-hardcore, which, as Chuck said, was super influential in me because I saw a lot of that at Gilman Street, Sam I Am, and Snuff and bands like this. But the band that just was an incredible inspiration, like a constant inspiration, was Radon for me. And I remember like I'd play Dave Rom like stuff I was doing on the guitar. He was super encouraging. He's a great guitarist. And I had this setup with this Roland amp that I put through my stereo in my bedroom at Spoke House, and he'd come and listen to it a couple times, and it was like super distorted. And he loved the sound, and he's like, "Oh, you got to bring that to hardback." Da, da. So, and then at some point he says, "Well, Brent and I are playing. Why don't you come over and check out these songs we're doing?" So I did, and it was just the two of them. Bill hadn't joined as drummer yet, and I remember they played what wound up being Facial Disobedience. I remember watching Dave's hands, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is so good. This is fucking our Husker Du." Like, I couldn't believe how good it was. And for me, I'm not a competitive person. I was just super inspired. And I was like, I hope we can play with them. Like they're gonna be great. And I hope that we're gonna be able to kind of maybe come up together. And they were just a source of constant like inspiration, influence. And they were also like just our dopey friends too. Like it wasn't like, they were this band on a pedestal or whatnot. Naomi's Hair was a little bit of that for us, but Radon,
Yeah, they were just pals.
now we get in firecracker wars with them and stuff like that. Like they were funny, like more funny guys that were just pals, but I mean they really had like a magic about them to
Yeah,
me.
for me, that's right. Like
To this day, they're the band that I've seen more than any other band. I think about them like a lot, and just like sometimes, like I'll listen to Wash Away, and I'll be like, it's just crazy to think that our pals made a song that or numerous songs that I would put against any other like punk rock song, certainly of the era, but maybe ever. So I have nothing but great things to say about Radon. Later, I'd come to learn, like way after the fact, like decades after the fact, that there was apparently like a rivalry among other people, like your Team Spoke or Team Radon.
Yes. Yeah, this was a thing. It was so stupid.
Which is ridiculous because I didn't
Oh,
know
it was
about
so
it at the
dumb.
time.
Like, oh yeah, no, I'm Team Radon. I'm
How
Team
did that
Spoke.
even start? How did you even learn about
I
it?
don't know, man. Because
Team
Well,
Radon.
just somebody brought it up. They're probably drunk and making fun of us.
Yeah.
That's how these things usually happen. I don't even know. I never felt it at all. Like I felt like a true sibling, not like rivalry, like sibling kinship. And I was always fascinated with what they did. And we went on like little tours together. And one thing
Yeah.
that was fascinating to me is Scott, Chuck, and I were always trying our best to like hold it all together, to try to figure out like how to make what we were doing better. Just like, there's always
Seemed to come easier to them.
yeah, it was always a billion problems when you're in a band. Like, does things break or things, don't fall into place right. And Radon, like, didn't seem to like sweat the small stuff too much like we did, and just fucking brought it. Like they just fucking made it happen and rocked. And I that's the one thing I was like, why can't it just fall in place for us? Because they seemed to, I mean, but they were naturals. Like what they were doing was perfect for who they were. And I have nothing but love for them as people and love for their music. And they really pushed things forward.
Yeah.
We happened to have a house that we lived in, and we tried lots of things. And I'll end this song. I'm hogging the conversation.
Yeah.
On this, but
Wrap it up, John.
we tried. Right? Yeah. Okay. We tried lots of things, and sometimes it was just like, well, I don't want Chuck to get too like. I don't want him to be frustrated by like too much of one sound. So let's try a different sound that he might like better. And those wound up being some of our the songs that I wound up being most satisfied about. Like I was like, maybe we can have a song that has a sort of De Kreutzen approach or something like that. Chuck really loved De Kreutzen. I
Yeah.
think I love De Kreutzen as well. And so we'd move in that direction sometimes just to try out different things, not to be like, oh, this is our De Kreutzen song, or this is our garage rock style, or this is our whatever. We wanted different sounds because we just listening to so many different things. Okay, I'm done.
Well, my thoughts on the
Shut up.
thing. Yeah, we were like boy bands, In Sync and Backstreet Boys. And we were probably 98 Degrees. I don't know. But Radon was like they performed and they sweated and it was just gritty and everybody in the crowd was crazy and all over the place. And we played and we get a little sweating, maybe kind of pat ourselves off with a little Kleenex just to get the sweat off. And people just kind of drank some cheap beer, but they had a great time. But it was different. With Radon, people were like rabid. When they were at the club,
It was great.
they'd pile in there and it was 100 people jumping up and down. It had a different energy level. For us, it was a good energy level. I don't think people, spoke and went outside, maybe a couple people. But for the most part, I think there was a bunch of bands that were able to play shows together where everybody stick around for the first band, take a little break, come back for the second band. And it wasn't, it was a good camaraderie all the way around. I don't think people were thinking, oh, okay, Spoke's next, and leave. People were there to see 3 cheap bands, drink some cheap beers, and they had a great time that night. That's how I felt and saw it. Radon, though, was like a rabid fan base that was all friends, and when they were done playing, everybody was super sweaty. So.
Yeah. They were a force. The last stage dive I took was at a Radon show.
Oh God!
And, for the record, Chuck, I got pretty damn sweaty at our shows, but that's kind of my problem. So that's my issue.
Well, the one thing I'll say about us though is that and other bands, for us, and this wasn't like a deliberate or conscious effort, but we just had this innate ability to maximize opportunity. When it sometimes the gods will give you gifts, and if you recognize them, you take them, right? And we were given more than we deserved. And, to the point with VAR, which I think we should get onto, is that we played that show, things were carrying on, and then VAR from No Idea, and we knew No Idea, this awesome magazine that came with every issue came with a 7-inch, right? And then VAR, long story short, says, hey, I want to put a 7-inch out of you guys. And now suddenly the gods have given us a gift and presented us a chance. And we were like, damn right. And so now we're like, okay, so we've met that goal of playing that first show. Now our new goal is, let's make this 7-inch. Yeah. All right, that's it. We thought nothing beyond that. Okay, let's do that. What's that going to be like? And so he put us in, and VAR was so, he's a weird guy, right? But he was into what we were doing. And many years later, I was reading an article interview with VAR, and he said something which took my breath away. He said, if it wouldn't have been for Spoke in those early days, I probably just would have given up in Gainesville and moved to Berkeley. And I was just like, holy crap, are you kidding me? Like us three dipshits had that kind of effect. Okay, whatever. So he says, I want to put the 7-inch out. So we're like, all right, how do we do that? Well, you're going to go record it at this guy's house in Tallahassee named Tommy Hamilton. And
did you know who Tommy Hamilton even was?
Hell no. Well, we knew he was in this band Gruel, and Gruel was like a band that was very similar to like what we first were introduced to in Gainesville. It was kind of heavy, grungy, earthy rock, but with an edge, right? And a little bit scary,
I think the cover was pretty scary, yeah.
Yes. And so they send us up there, and we go and we meet Tommy Hamilton, who turns out to be just like almost like a character. I mean, he was just like a magical human being. He was so patient with us.
Yeah.
And it was in his house, and now we have like a proper studio, and it was 8 tracks. This is back in the day, right? I mean, but we'd never done anything like this before, and it was freaking awesome. Like, it was work, and again, we're not that great of musicians, so it took a lot of takes and stuff. But we had a sound and an idea of what we wanted to do, and recording back in the day was such a sort of exhausting experience, because you do the recording and then you listen to the raw tapes and you're like, oh my god, this sounds like shit, and then you still have to like go master it, and then it was always this anxiety, like, oh, what's it ultimately going to sound like? Anyway, we did the 7-inch, and we did it, and VAR puts it out, and it's on colored vinyl, and we were like, holy shit, we've done this, and then in true Spoke fashion, I'll let Jon or Chuck take over. Oh, he's got it.
Yep. I had never seen colored vinyl prior to that.
I'll let these guys talk about like what the little Spoke edition for the 7-inch, which was a very Spoke move, which was what, guys?
Napkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over to you, man. Over to y'all.
I have the napkin in my copy.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Do you have yours too, Chuck? Is a napkin in your copy?
You're the best, dude. That's amazing. I've
got test pressings and all this stuff. I don't know how
I don't have.
You don't want. Yeah.
There's
There it is. The Spoke napkin.
Oh my god.
We had a party essentially with us and like 3 other pals, just
ruined it.
Yeah, don't spill your quarter pounder on it, dude. VAR had stamps made. So VAR was working as a designer at a screen print shop, and he had stamps made, and we all stamped these napkins, and we just thought it was just like dopey, funny, odd shit that we were constantly like trying to come up with. And VAR was down, and he became, I wound up being roommates with him, and he became a really, really good friend. And I mean, he was just awesome. And not just how much support that he showed, and he put his money where his mouth was and like kind of investing in us, but we'd get him in our goofy shit too. We'd ensnare him in into our like, dumb shenanigans as well. And he seemed energized by it. And I think that's one thing that maybe we were helped be a little bit of a catalyst along with a lot of other things to VAR, to other bands, to other people. Just, I don't want to overstate anything, like seriously, like let's de-emphasize our place in anything, but we were just doing it. We were doing it, and other people, I think, were like, well, we can do it too. I really think that's about it, and have fun and whatnot. And then per what Tommy, per what Scott said about Tommy Hamilton, the guy had a truly saintly quality about him. And again, he sort of put up with just like our incapability of like recording well. And he'd like kind of coax us. And then we'd like, bring him into our goofy shit. And then he had his own, like, I remember he had like this stack of international magazines about like, speed metal and grindcore and stuff from Malaysia and whatnot. We just found this fascinating. And so he brought another sort of presence to us that wasn't
Huge.
And you guys recorded mostly everything with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably how many songs did we have recorded, John? About 30?
Something like that, yeah.
At least 30 songs, and they're all with Tommy Hamilton. And our first recordings, you can tell as we went through the 3-year process, the recordings got a little better. We understood what we were doing a little bit better. When I listened to the first recordings, I probably didn't know how to tune my drum set, and everything just kind of got better, and he guided us. There weren't very many times that he'd shake his head at us. So we must have been, he let us go and just record the songs. And Scott, I don't remember us doing a lot of takes. I think we did a lot of
maybe it was me. It was probably me.
I did a lot of takes.
But we got better. The recordings got better. Tommy put up with us the whole time. He was a very patient, easygoing guy, and sometimes had some good ideas, but he kind of just let us do our thing. He didn't control at all. He wasn't a controlling person, but I don't know. I still think that that 7-inch that we did with what's his name again from Orlando?
Figurehead?
Jim Faraday.
Yeah, that one, the sound quality on that one's really good. Like that was I think our second recording session.
Yes.
That one sounds really good. But regardless, the point is we only recorded in Tallahassee. So that's what we knew. But a lot of other bands didn't. Less than Jake and Radon, some of those bands went up and recorded with Tommy as well.
Yeah,
so kind of like a stepping stone for a lot of us Gainesville bands to go to a studio. I mean, I guess Mirror Image was in Gainesville, but I never recorded there, so I didn't really know about that much.
Yeah, it was expensive. Tommy at the time was $15 an hour.
Yeah, he was
trying to do anything. He was fun to hang out with. And I mean, like, let's just, in case Tommy ever watches this.
Oh, God, I hope he does.
We really pushed him to the limit at some points when we recorded our album. I mean, he was staying awake for like 28 hours or something like we were. And so all apologies, Tommy, you're the best. And we absolutely loved like and his, I think his equipment got better. His capability got better as well. And so, it was really interesting to see that evolution too. My one of the few things I wish we did was when we went on sort of a semi-national tour and we went to DC, it never occurred to me that we could maybe try to get in touch to book some time with Don Zientara, who did all the Discord stuff to record a couple of songs just to hear what the difference might be, to see what and like bands do that, they try different producers. We never were able to do that. I love Zientara's like his body of work and his kind of ethos and the sound that he'd get from the bands, but Tommy was just, I mean, we just loved the guy, and we were happy when other bands went up to him and just like, I don't know, the Gainesville studios none of them seemed at the time. Rob McGregor would open a studio, and that became a very, really.
Yeah, but that's kind of after our time.
That was after us. At the time, there was nothing. So Tommy was the guy.
Yeah.
We were super happy to work with him.
Were you guys playing any other towns around Florida?
Yeah. So I mean,
too? Where else were you playing?
Right. So that was Jeff, that leads to the next step, right? So now we've done this recording, now we're playing shows in Gainesville. Now our new goal was let's play out of town. Right. And so we started doing that. And, John and Chuck will have their own versions of this, but we did essentially we did play Orlando and Miami and stuff, but then really when it came to tours, we did two that were like extended, right? One was kind of an Eastern Seaboard. That was our first one, and my God, I mean that's like a Kerouacian tale.
Yeah.
And then we did a second tour, which was much broader, and that was like 8 weeks. I mean, it was freaking glorious. But for me, we back in the day, college radio was still a thing, right? And so VAR would send our single out, or our 7 inches out, and these college radio stations would mail back how many times our 7-inch had been played. So we could get a sense of where maybe our stuff's getting played, which is just so anachronistic and wonderful. Or like what, really? That's how it happened? Yeah, that's how it happened. And so VAR came to us and said, look, you guys are getting a lot of airplay from this guy who runs a college radio show in Columbus, South Carolina, which was a college town, right? I don't know what college it was.
South Carolina. University of South Carolina.
Okay, there you go. That makes it simple. Thanks, mate. And so we were like, let's go play there. And I'm sure we did a lot of other out-of-town shows, but this one for me, so we go up there and we get this little crew with us. We've got these little buddies that come with us, these friends that will come along as helpers, right? And so we go up there and we get in touch with this guy, this real Southern boy, very, very kind, nice guy. He says, yeah, let's put this show together. You'll play with my band and Avail. And so we're like, okay. And, and Avail was kind of coming on the scene at that time. And we show up to this place. And again, I might be coloring in the lines, but I remember this is the first time that we had played a place where there were people waiting outside. They're waiting outside this club. And we were like, holy shit, man, this is amazing. And our sort of friends, let's call him a friend, the guy who ran the radio show, his band plays first. And they're the local band, so everybody's into it and stuff. And then we come on, and it was the first time in my life. We don't know any of these people, right? This isn't a Gainesville crowd. This isn't Orlando crowd. This isn't a Miami crowd. This is some rando crowd that we don't know any of these people, and these people are singing some of our songs back to us.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit! If I thought I was hooked before, I am deeply hooked now. Not because it fed my ego, but because I just thought, this is amazing. These wonderful strangers that we don't know, we are connecting through our music that we created. And there was something about that night, man, I got bloody goosebumps thinking about it. I'm 55 years old. And then, Avail played. So there was this real energy. And for me, that's kind of like when Spoke went to I don't want to call it a next level because that's kind of grandiose, but it kind of was like now we kind of felt like a functioning band instead of just like, hey, we play some shows in Gainesville and in Florida. Now we're like, holy shit, maybe we're like a band now.
Were there any songs in particular that you feel like were the more crowd pleasers at that time too?
Well,
of course.
They seemed to like the first 7-inch for some reason. I don't know. They knew those.
Well,
they like the faster stuff too.
Songs like Crushed, there was Just a Thought, and from that first 7-inch, right? So, but yeah,
we get booked with a lot of like hardcore and punk bands. We were sort of like slotted in to that by the clubs and whatnot. And that first that on that Eastern Seaboard tour in Columbus, I mean, I know exactly what Scott is talking about. Partly that the magic of that was that there was no expectation on our part. So to hear, like we would never have thought that somebody would be singing our lyrics and stuff back to us. And to me, I was like, I just remember making these songs in the bedroom with the guitar and writing, because this is who I am, like writing draft after draft of lyrics and finally being kind of happy with it. And then being kind of, when we tried out, being like, this kind of sucks, but let's just go forward with it. And then to put it on record, and then to have that record go out, to have somebody hear it, to have somebody like the record, to have somebody commit it to memory, and then go like take the make the energy, go to the show, pay the money, and then to hear the song and sing it back to you, which I'd done, all of us, had done thousands of times, to have that happen to us. I definitely at the time felt I just couldn't believe it. I was like, we weren't worthy, but also there's no expectation for it too.
Yeah.
So that was a really surprising and incredible moment, just incredible moment for us, because we don't think of ourselves as much of like we're just three guys doing our best to really, we had sounds in our head, we had melodies and sounds in our head that we were just trying to bring to life, and they weren't anything that were innovative, but they were putting together kind of different ideas and different aesthetics, and somehow that was working out, and we were really surprised, and we didn't take it for granted, and we didn't think much of ourselves for doing it. It was almost it was just somehow happening with the sum was greater than the three of us.
Yeah.
That's really how it felt. It was very surprising.
Thought
So,
to answer that, John. One thing that we experienced with that tour, more so than us being the ones to go see bands play, was seeing other people just like us in a town where they're looking for fun and they play in bands. They're the same energy level, maybe even more. So when we'd go to these towns, you were seeing people just like us expressing themselves and having the same fun and enjoying music like we did when we'd see bands. So that was one thought that I had, young kids with tons of energy and music driving their life. And then another thought was, you had mentioned that you would write the lyrics in your bedroom with a guitar. And I remember I'd get off work and pass by the house and your windows were open and your lights are on and late at night and you'd be in there playing guitar and all that stuff. You did it that way. For me, I worked at a record store, and at closing time, I'd have to vacuum the carpets all over the place. And I'd sit there after listening to music all day long, and I'd have these like melodies in my head and these lyrics, and I'd sit there and I'd be vacuuming and I'd be going back and forth in my head. I'm like, I need to go write that down. And I'd go over to the counter and with a piece of paper and write down, lyrics from, Just a Thought, which that song was just stream of consciousness. It doesn't make any sense to tell you. And I just kind of I'm sitting there vacuuming going, doing that. And when I'd see John and Scott half hour later, we'd go out to practice at this tree farm. I don't know, whatever the facility was. We'd go out there and I'd say, I was kind of having this thought. It sounded like this, and and John would kind of start playing the guitar, and Scott would kind of, thump on the bass a little bit, slap of the bass. Anyways, next thing we know, by the end of the night, we had a song, and I'd written the lyrics, in strange circumstances. It's just cool that you could be doing something and come up with a song. I mean, we weren't like Paul McCartney writing some legendary song, but our songs, who knows what we were doing at the time or what influenced it, but that's the best thing about it, is just being creative. And I always thought that song was really weird because it doesn't make any sense. And I think people just like the melody, but if they actually listen to the lyrics and sing it, she's like a pond of water. What does that mean? I was now and
they loved it.
But
yeah, they'd sing it right back.
But Jeff, to your point about what songs connected with the audience, my opinion was that the songs that really connected were the songs that kind of came easier to us as a band to in the first place, right? Because some songs, and any band will tell you, some songs are like work. Man, you're working at that song, and it's good, but it feels like work. And then some songs just came out of the ether. They just arrived, and they came easy. So songs like Crushed, Just a Thought, Antihistamine, Sculpture, Ruptured Seam,
The Scant came in an hour and a half. We were like
Mothra. And then, like a song like 80%, which, in my mind, if you had to put me in a corner and say, what was the song that you like playing the most? It was that song. That's when I felt like we had found something. Like it's a very simple song, but my God, it didn't matter where we were playing that tune. It could have been Gainesville or Columbus or Chicago or St. Louis. When we played that song, even if people didn't know us, that song connected, and that song came to us. We didn't craft it out of clay, right? So, Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but it was kind of to your question, like those
Yeah,
songs that
it
connected.
was one of those songs that, to your point, that connected with the audience. And when you were going on these tours, and you mentioned you had played a lot of different places, a lot of different cities, were there any other smaller towns that Spoke played that surprised you by the vibe of the crowd and just the scene, or any stories that were the opposite of that?
Oh, lots of opposites. Yeah. Where it was
Yeah,
there were more people on stage, meaning three of us, than in the audience. Yeah. I mean the first one that comes to mind for sure is Richmond. We played at Avail's house before they the
yeah,
day before they were taking off. And that you asked about memorable shows. That's one of there are memorable shows, Jeff, that are like because they were so great and the bands we played with were so great, and then memorable shows because they were so like comically terrible, or the bands we played with were like bizarrely hilarious, or something along those lines. That's how it splits up for me anyway. Richmond was really
yeah,
interesting at the time, really cool, and those Avail guys couldn't have been
yeah. That was a crazy show,
more.
Jeff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
because
it was
we
wild.
had a gig booked at this proper club, right? And we rocked up, and we had arranged because we kind of became friends with Avail in a sort of loose way. Um, and they welcomed us to stay at their home kindly. And then they're like, "Hey, where are you guys playing?" And we told them the name of the club. We're like, "Oh, dude, nobody's going to be there." And we're like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, the owner's been like sort of found out to be a Klan supporter." And we're like, Klan supporter? Or some kind of racist thing. He's like, yeah, everybody's boycotting that club. Nobody's going to be there. And we're like, oh, fuck. And then in
Like that
true
tracks
punk,
for Spoke. That tracks for us. We're gonna play the club
yes.
we're gonna be at. That makes sense.
And in true punk rock fashion, these Avail guys put the word out before the internets and even phones or text. Somehow the word gets out. Hey, Avail's going to play a house show with this band Spoke. And there was like 200 freaking 300 kids show up, and we played on like the above ground, the second story uh, lounge, their living room. And I remember there were so many kids in there who were playing. The freaking floor was sort of like, because it was kind of a squat where they lived. This was very much a punk rock squat. The floor was like sort of moving, like, oh, is this floor going to cave in? And that was amazing. And then on that second tour, we played St. Louis. That was really interesting because we played with Nuisance from the Bay Area, and they were great. They were kind of in line with us, but we also played at that same gig with 7 Year Bitch, who were definitely like, but we got the crowd on our side. And the other thing that we did with these towns is on our second tour, we got to a point that we actually had a guarantee. So like on our first, like most of our shows, maybe we got paid $10 or $20. On the second tour, we had some semblance of a guarantee, but where we in
Yeah,
true
we were
spoke,
paid
go
$20.
ahead.
I said, yeah, we were guaranteed to be paid $20.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it was something, but in true spoke fashion, what we did, we we were like, okay, because we would sell merchandise, we would sell shirts and our records and stuff. We would sell a shirt and a 7 inch for $10. $10, right? So somebody shows up to a show and they think, well, that band was pretty good. It's probably worth $10 for a shirt and a 7 inch. And that got us from town to town. And that was a very spoke move, right? That was absolutely inspired by Fugazi. That ethos of just like, we're not about this profit, but we just wanted to kind of get our stuff out there. But at the same time, it also gave us gas money to get to the next town.
Good deal. Yeah, it was a good deal. So much of what we did was inspired by Fugazi at the time. They were, for me, it was like Fugazi, Husker, Ray Gun, they were like kind of top level, bands for what was inspirational to me. It's like, as much as like Joy Division and Sonic Youth and lots of other, tons and tons of other stuff. But to Scott's point, like we were able to, we kind of devised these sort of kind of goofball ways that were a little bit different than the norm to that kind of made us stand out just a tiny bit, to kind of get from place to place. I mean, the thing that I remember most about the Richmond show with the Veil is that the whole like floor is starting to bounce, like because everybody's bouncing with us and with it, and then so we're done, but then a Veil goes on, and they go crazy, and they're starting to jump up and down on the floor trying to make it collapse. And so I go downstairs to be like, what the hell is underneath this floor? And the chunks of the ceiling are coming down, and the people who lived on that downstairs floor were moving all their shit out. And I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. But that's when they had Bo, who was like their cheerleader,
Yeah.
and him like pounding, pounding, pounding. So that was one. And then I mean, there was lots of stuff that we did that was sort of. There were a couple of things that were sort of self-sabotaging that were kind of funny in our shows.
Oh, Jesus. You're going to talk about the quicksand show.
Yeah, we were like, it was a club covered dish that we knew pretty well. So we're like, let's try something. Let's just try something different. So Chuck, you play on the stage. Scott will play.
No. Chuck played at the back of the hall, and we played on stage.
No, because I wasn't on I was on the far wing by the bar with Ollie. I was on so basically we're all far away.
Okay.
So we were like triangulating, and we never once thought that, well, maybe the sound is going to sort of travel at different speeds for the three of us. And what wound up happening is we were all a little off time,
which pretty normal, anyways.
Yeah, we were off time under even the best of circumstances, but now we were a little bit more so. I remember watching the crowd, and nobody was moving, and they were all looking a little nauseous. They're all kind of like, and it never really dawned on me. It sounded great to me, but it was all a little bit off. And so talking to Walter from Quicksand afterwards, he was like, "Yeah, that was a pretty bold experiment. Not really sure if you should do it again." But he did recognize that we did this sort of slow down cover of Salad Days by Minor Threat, and he was pretty into that. So he recognized that much.
So he was being nice in his response.
Yeah,
it
nice.
Probably sounded like absolute shit.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
That said that they liked it just because it was experimental was basically Kevin Rose. At the time, everybody else, what was that? It was
a great failure, a noble failure. But we saw other bands that were even more like wonderful failures when we were in, I believe, North Carolina. The show started crazy because this guy came in and he had this drug freak out, like this almost like seizuring drug freak out, where he got on the floor and made all these crazy sexual gestures and these imploring, sort of God, whatever. Anyway, and then he goes and sits on our records, and so we were like, "Oh, this is going to be a hell of a show," and we had to kick him out, sort of. Well, everybody had to kick him out bodily, and then we played, and we weren't very good, and nobody liked us. But then the band who played at the end was a local band that called themselves Vile, and perfect name, and it was just a dude, a Weird Al looking dude, a Doug Henning looking dude. He had like a long curly hair and glasses and a mustache, and he was on the vocals. And you had this skinhead looking guy who was on bass, like a distorted bass, and he had an amp, and he had to keep the plug in the bass with his ankle up. He had to like hold the plug in with his ankle, and they'd start, and so the bass would just be like, no drums, no anything else, and the vocalist would just single out, peep everybody in the crowd that he knew, and he'd just start yelling epithets at them and just be like, Tony, you're fat, you blah, or like, Jimmy, stop going out with that whore, like one after another. These were their songs, and on cue, everybody just starts throwing shit at them. Just like this back and forth, and they're just throwing every ashtrays and just whatever they can find. And like one guy tries to throw a table, and it lands on another guy, and then finally, he besmirches one of the patrons' girlfriends in the most vulgar way, and so the guy goes, "Fuck you, man!" and he picks up a chair and just throws it right at him, and it hits the amp. And Goodnight Vile. And the whole thing probably was 15 minutes, and I was like, "That is the best band that we're going to see on tour." That was.
I don't know how you top something like that.
You can't top something like that. So,
what about you, Chuck? Do you remember any shows?
What, that were instrumental in
No,
Whatever.
shows that we did that stuck out for you.
well, performing in the parking lot of that auto repair shop in South Carolina before we end up getting interviewed on the country radio station. That was unique. The Temple of the
to
Radio.
say the least.
Remember that one in Philadelphia?
Of course.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of like bikers and like kind of.
we want to get out of it. Amazing shows would definitely be South Carolina. I felt like we always had people having seizures at our shows, though. So I don't know what that was.
Yes, that did happen a fair amount of
A lot of
times.
times.
This was our effect, Jeff, on people, was to put them into seizures.
I don't have many guests who tell stories like that.
We have so many stories. John's book just gives so much input on the experiences we had that we would talk forever to talk about. But like the tours, I still taste peanut butter sandwiches with mint tea. Our friend Wyatt was driving an old Volkswagen Bug, like a van, and on tour with our equipment, and we broke down on the side of the road. And like idiots, we don't have like AAA or anything where they can come and tow you. So we pushed the van for miles on the side of the road in the middle of the night to like the nearest, exit or something like that. And all we had was peanut butter sandwiches and mint tea. And we're like, this is how we're starting out our tour. Those memories are ingrained in my brain. The other stories that you mentioned, like me dressing up like a skinhead for a Halloween party, I don't remember that stuff. I can tell you the tour stories. Being on tour and recording in the studio are some of the best things that I experienced in being in a band, and I love them. Being in a studio, it's like putting together a puzzle, where it's like one piece and you add another. And when we would be mastering it or sitting around finishing it up, you're like, can't believe it sounds this good, because we could never reproduce that to sound that good live or when we're practicing it. It was neat to hear it in its final results, and we'd get together with our friends in Gainesville and we'd sit down and say, listen to how it sounds. And, they would probably, be nice to us and say, yeah, it sounds pretty good. But regardless, some of the tours experiences I remember, I think that second tour, we were earning money so we could record with Tommy one more time. Remember
Yes.
Mom's basement, and a lot of patient, cool people putting up with us. That's what I would say. 3 years of people putting up with us.
Did you guys use Maximum Rock and Roll magazine to learn about different places to play and contacts and that sort of thing?
Yeah, there was a guide called I think it was called Book Your Own Fucking Life. That was fun. And then just from other bands, from friends, from VAR, from lots of folks that were, just helpful. There was such a network at that point, so it was you just found out about the places one way or the other. But pre-internet, it was a little bit more difficult.
I know you guys also had that interview that you did for Maximum Rock and Roll. What do you remember about that experience?
You're breaking up there, Jeff.
It's our friend Pat, and
we're having an audio problem here. I can hear you just fine.
Our friend Pat did a great job of bringing questions that would provide us sort of kind of maximum, I don't know, confusion or whatnot. They were super funny questions, but we were just in a goofball.
We got caught off guard with Pat Hughes's brilliant.
And
let's put it this way, Jeff. You're a punk band. Maximum Rock and Roll was the Bible, right? And now you get the opportunity to have your freaking interview on MRR, and you're like, oh man, this is it. We've made it. And then we got it, and we were like, what? And we just got he took this weird angle with it, or unique angle, and Chuck actually probably did the best out of it. I certainly was the worst, because I was just confused. And I remember at one point, actually, I can't believe I said it, but I'm like, oh man, I wanted my mom to read this. I was like, oh God. But they bloody printed it, man. They printed it. And I remember we met Nuisance on the second tour in St. Louis. And they're like, oh, you're the Spoke guys. And, this isn't a word that is used nowadays, but this is what they said. So it's just, historically contextual. They said, we read that interview in MRR, and we thought you guys might have been kind of retarded. And we're like, oh, geez, man, that's just so horrible. Ugh, yeah. So, Yeah.
God, I wonder if anybody has ever said in MRR, I wanted my mom to read this. I wanted my
Oh,
mom to
it's
read
so
MRR.
horrible. Like
Yeah.
I'm such a loser.
Did
But
your mom ever read it?
I hope
no,
not.
no way. Seriously, Jeff, if you read this interview, you'd be like, oh man, that's
Yeah,
not
it
very
sucks.
good.
But Pat, I thought was super funny. Our friend
Oh
Pat,
yeah.
kind of like
Like if we
one of
could
the
do that
three.
again, I would have freaking, I could have understood, what he was doing, but I was just a dumb kid, right? So,
Pat is indisputably one of the kings of Gainesville punk rock, and he's a great friend of ours. And he's in this fantastic band now called Wired Up, and and he is one of the best writers that any of us knows. Like I know plenty of writers. He's a fantastic writer, particularly humor writer. So he's coming in with all of his sort of humor writing kind of sensibilities, and he wanted to get something kind of different from us, and God bless him for it. It's just we weren't up to the task. We're just too moronic.
but
So
yeah, Pat was our champion as well.
yeah,
He was like the next evolution of VAR because then he, on his own dime, wanted to put out a proper CD of us, and so our second sort of, it was like a full length CD, and so he did it in conjunction with Allied Recordings, and we
and
recorded that
Mike Williams, yeah, who
with
also
Mike Wilgemuth as
this
well,
is
and so
yeah. So thank you to Pat and Woogie and Var and John Yates and Allied who put their they invested in us for whatever goddamn reason, but
That was all we need of hell, right?
yeah, yeah,
yes
yeah.
sir, yeah, and we recorded
Thank you
that
for
when we
knowing that, Jeff. Thank you for
yeah,
even.
thank
I
you.
enjoy
Sorry,
that
Scott.
album.
Sorry.
It's a good record.
Oh,
Well, that's when we were kind of firing on all the cylinders. It was towards the end, right? And we recorded it coming off the tour. So we finished the tour in Pensacola, and then we went straight to Tallahassee, and we lived at Tommy Hamilton's house for 5 days, maybe 6 days. We slept on his floor. He was so awesome. He's just like, all right, goofballs, you can stay here. And I'll tell you, as a singular experience as a human being, that creative duration of time was magnificent, right? Because all we did for 5 or 6 days was make and record music. And the and we'd come off a tour, so we were in spoke terms, we were relatively tight, and
That's funny.
and
heavy emphasis on relatively. Yeah.
but
Less.
yeah, it was and that was kind of the kind of swan song of the spoke days, man, because after that, that's when everything kind of wrapped up, and we recorded this album, and unfortunately, that's where it sort of culminated, because then we very soon after that, we ceased to be a band.
Did you guys feel like you got a chance to play a lot of songs on that record live?
Oh yeah, we played them all live. Yeah, for sure.
We played them for quite a while before we recorded,
Okay.
I don't think there's a single song that we did on that record that we hadn't played out a lot, particularly.
Oh, I can tell you one. We did Inga because John went off to get lunch one day, and he's just like, I'm gonna go get some sandwiches, and Chuck and I were like, hey, let's smoke a little weed and make a song. And Tommy Hamilton loves smoking.
God, I don't know.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. We decided to do something, and
Well,
so
I came back and they're like, well, we made another song, and they played it, and we were listening to. I mean, at that point, like there was like Mercury Rev and Unrest and stuff like that. That played that did sort of like experimental pop stuff, and it's sort of this quieter kind of abstract song. And I was like, okay, cool. You guys want to do this? Fine by me, So that was just
Chuck did these amazing layered reverb vocals on it, and we're like, well, shit, let's put this on the album then, and we did, and I love it. I mean, to this day, I still listen to that song.
I usually skip it, to tell you the truth.
Well,
Hop over that one, but yeah, it was. There's some times. I think there was a time when we recorded. Was it Mariotto, where I did the scream kind of buried to kind of sound like DeCroixson kind of thing, and I think Scott came back and was like, "What is that? What is it?" Just be patient. Just listen to it. We'll bury it, in the noise part, and it wasn't so bad. You can't really hear it. But
Yeah,
the point,
I kind of love that. I kind of love you came up with that on the spot, or maybe you've been thinking about it for a while, but you didn't tell us about it. You
yeah,
did it. I fucking thought that was like, I'm a little bit, Jeff, I'm a little bit of a harsher critic on it. Like, I'll listen to our recorded stuff and mostly hear the mistakes. So I don't listen to our stuff a lot, but there are certain moments, there are moments that are creative or they just kind of work. And that's like what Chuck is talking about. I love that he did it, and it kind of makes this, it's a kind of a whatever song that I like, but that kind of makes it for me, makes it special, I guess.
yeah. I don't think there were a whole lot of songs or things where we surprised each other. Like there was a couple moments where somebody would step out and like Scott and I would say, let's just do this. Let's see what John will think of this. And surprisingly, it went over pretty well. Now I don't remember that we stayed at Tommy Hamilton's.
We did.
How nice of him to let a bunch of dumb
Oh yeah.
stay on his floor.
He kind of liked us, man, because we were nice guys, right? So we didn't make we didn't make trouble for him, and so yeah, he let us sleep on his floor, and
That's 24 hours with us. That's a lot.
Yeah, cool.
Did you all have any moments when you were also touring where wherever you were sleeping, looking back on it, you would not have done that again?
I have one.
I know where this is going.
In that hotel in Indiana,
oh man,
Cloverfield, Indiana, or something like that. I think there were bed bugs. There was like pit bull hair all over the sheets and stuff. We had actually paid for that. We usually slept on people's floors and experienced that kind of thing. But I think that was pretty horrible night, wasn't it? Wasn't that just a
yeah.
shithole?
Indeed. It's ironic that the one of the shittiest places we stayed at was the one we paid to. But for me, Jeff, the beautiful, wonderful thing about that punk rock grassroots community was, we slept on a lot of people's floors, and some floors were cleaner than others, but we were always grateful. Because I can't really ever think of a dodgy one, except for when we played this show in Philadelphia where they offered to let us stay there, and it was like this drug squat biker thing, and we were like, oh yeah, we're just gonna go get some food and we'll be back, and we left and drove to New York. We're like, screw this, man.
Just to be clear about this, Scott and I, we kind of took a vote with everybody there. There was the three of us and
oh yeah, and then we had three friends of ours that were roadies.
Yeah. So Ethan, Bill, and Anthony, and so we had to think of them too. And Scott and I, because this was sort of who we were at the time, were like, well, this seems kind of interesting. Like, let's see where this might go, because it was just getting the night was falling apart a little, and it was just getting wilder and wilder. But I remember like the other guys were not so into it, and Chuck I remember you made like an executive decision, and you were like, yeah, this isn't safe. We got to go.
Well, we pulled into like some sort of industrial area where the people were all shady and closed the gate behind us. Yeah. And we're like, this doesn't feel good. So
everybody who's been to Philly has a story like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was.
I just remember the guy kept on. He was like the sound man were playing, and he kept on walking on stage and turning down the volume of my amp.
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck are you doing? And he's like, and so I say into the mic, I'm like, why did you turn my fucking volume down? And he's like, well, we got the Irish mob here. We don't want to piss them off. And we were like, fuck the Irish mob. You have a punk club. So I just kept turning it right back up between songs, and he'd turn it back down during the song. So there was a lot with that. I remember, I don't know, Scott and Chuck, if you remember this, when we played in Pensacola, Sluggos, is that where we played?
Yeah.
And we were staying at a friend, I think it was Jesse's place. I'm not quite sure, but she was like, oh yeah, just come on over. And we didn't, it was Florida. She was a pal we thought would be cool. We get over, and all her roommates were woken up, and they were like, we don't want this band staying here. Like, why are you bringing another band in? And it was like this super, like, we're the kind of people who want to be good guests. We try to be gracious. We didn't want to impose. And like all of her roommates were like, fuck this. These guys got to get out of here. And Jessie like gets in a big fight with them. And she's like, no, they're staying. And we're just kind of creeping sheepishly up the stairs into like, I found an ottoman to sleep on. That's what I slept on, was like a sofa, like a lazy boy kind of ottoman. And I'm just kind of like all hurled up, like, they don't want us here. So yeah, there weren't many places like that though. Mostly everybody was welcoming as hell. So
another Florida town we haven't really tapped into that I know you played the Blue Chair was Tampa. Any stories about any shows in Tampa, including the Blue Chair?
Yeah, that was a brilliant gig. I remember because we had a lot of friends that lived there, but also there was a bit of a I guess following or whatever, as there would be for any punk band. But we played a gig in Sarasota and then also at the Blue Chair, and there was a lot of kids like from like the Ringling School of Art and Design, right? A lot of those guys. And then when we played the Blue Chair, I remember I just kind of came up with this. Again, this is when we were sort of later days when we actually could kind of play our instruments better. I came up just like on the fly with this bass line that came out of nowhere, and I start playing it, and the kids start getting into it. And then Chuck, he picks up on the thing, and then Jon just adds this guitar. It ended up, I don't think we ever actually ended up using it, or maybe we incorporated it somehow into 80% loosely. But I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that was one of the very few moments in my life where I improv something, and it was at the Blue Chair, and the crowd responded to it right away, and I was like, fuck yeah, punk rock music, awesomeness, this is just the best. And the Blue Chair was an interesting venue because it was pretty small, which lended well to us because, we didn't have 6 million people coming out to see us. So
was that with Asok?
Yes.
Yeah, that was funny, Jeff, because like our stuff, like, I mean, it was noisy and we had fast parts and whatnot, but compared to Asuk, it was like comparatively, it was like the Little River Band opening for them or something. Like, like they're just all blast beats and they're amazing and we love them. But it was like, they're a tidal wave, they were so good, but we were just like, it was like, I don't know, like Andy Gibb opening or something for,
But I remember those Ringling kids. They brought out a sheet of cardboard and started breakdancing during our set.
Yeah.
And I was just like, God damn, man, I just love everyone in this community. Like, you dipshits have brought a freaking cardboard box out and you're breakdancing during our set. I mean, it was good to be it was just wonderful, right? I just feel so privileged to witness such jackassery.
Yeah, it also helped that for a lot of different reasons, skinheads kind of left the scene by then, more or less.
Yes. Man, dude, we wouldn't have existed.
There's a whole lot of reasons for that, but it really made our lives better that by 1991, like we didn't have to deal.
That was done.
Skinheads from the stage. So that also was like the scenes were just thriving. They were thriving all over the place. Now, Chuck, do you remember? Because Scott, you said you've not remembered this as much, but when we played in Sarasota and while we were playing, the storm of the century happened and it like flooded.
Actually, thinking it about 4 minutes ago when Scott started talking about the Sarasota show, yeah, it kind of flooded, and yeah, I was thinking about that just a minute ago.
Yeah, it was a great show, but I got sick, and Chuck, you wound up having to drive me. Like you drove me home through this crazy storm, remember, like all the things falling and whatnot. What's that?
Scott Adams' car or something?
Yeah, our great friend Scott Adams, who like is a huge part of our story. He was at his parents' house bailing out the basement because everything was flooding. And he was like, "Do you guys think you might be able to pick me up?" And like, he'd gone on the whole Florida tour with us and did like everything we asked him to. And so Chuck was the hero. He dragged my carcass in and then picked up Scott Adams. And I mean, like, I remember like big like street signs falling and like, just all sorts of crazy shit, like wires whipping around in the wind. It was a hurricane, like more or less.
Yeah.
So, but so it flooded this loft, or not loft, it was like a warehouse while we were playing. So we had all these submerged fucking wires under the water, and I was like, how are we all not being electrocuted?
John, you know why I was able to drive like that? You remember that F-Zero Nintendo game?
Awesome.
Yeah, that's all I do when I'm driving. It's like
that's right. You're the man for the moment. Then better me. I never played that Nintendo game, so go ahead.
Did you guys ever experience any injuries while you were on stage, or perhaps if you were watching a show, maybe it was a band was playing along with you, you were in the crowd, anything like that ever happened to you guys?
No, just to our dignity.
Tell me about Atlanta, Scott, the guy in Atlanta, the like a hardcore band that played after us. He was on it. The drums were on a high riser. It was like 12 feet high for whatever reason at this club. And the poor guy fell off the riser, and we didn't know what happened at first because all of a sudden, they were playing this kind of metalcore, and then it's not like the drums stop. The rest of them go, and the drums just stop, like done. And then he's on the other end with like I don't know, a broken shoulder or something
I
like that.
think he had to take a bio break.
Yeah. The worst bio break ever.
Yeah, I don't remember any injuries. I think, we were in good shape back then. 20s. If we did this now, I would be falling off the riser and everything else. I mean, I can't believe that some bands can stick together for 30, 40, 50 years and keep doing this. I have a drum set right here behind me, and I tried to play one of our like antihistamine or something like that I used to be able to play, and I can get about 40 seconds into it before I'm ready to fall out of the drum set. So, I mean, Jon came over here, what was that, about a year ago with the amp and guitar, and we kind of played a little bit, jammed, and it was fun. We kind of we dabbled, and we created a little tune. But, it's just hard to believe like bands like Less and Jake and others that we used to play with are still doing it 40 years later.
God bless them.
Super impressive. Like on that point, Chuck, like with Les and Jake, as a matter of fact, Jeff, a couple of years ago, Les and Jake, who we're still friends with and are absolutely a successful touring band to this day, they kindly reached out and wanted us to get together to do a reunion with them. And they were going to pay for it. They were going to pay for us idiots to come out and open up for them. And Les and Jake commands thousands of people. And it was tempting, and Chuck and I were really tempted, and Jon was more realistic about it. I think there were two sides to it. One, we would have had to like get together and really, really focus and just try to like, oh man, practice for like 5 days straight just to get maybe 8 songs back, and then the great potential of stepping out on a stage with a bunch of people in the audience and kind of screwing it up. That's not a great, But then Jon's point as well, one of the things about Spoke for us is that we it sounds kind of highfalutin, but there was a kind of purity to it. We weren't in it for anything except just we didn't take ourselves seriously, but we took what we did seriously, and it was kind of a sacred thing, and it was very, very flattering. God bless them. But either A, we would have made idiots of ourselves, or B, maybe it's really it was this very crystalline part of our lives, this time of our lives,
Yeah,
So.
I think a lot of bands, when they do reunions, and it's many years later, the songs are much slower, and we don't need to go up there and play the tempos half the speed we used to do, and I understand, it'd be fun, but there was a time and a place, and that time and place happened, and we had a great time. And if we did a reunion, I would do it because it would be fun, and I've always wanted to continue playing music, and I'd like to do it with these guys and see people, but it would sound like crap.
Just quickly, I mean, that particular lesson, Jake, which was incredibly kind of them to offer. In the end, I couldn't because I had another existing commitment at that time, so I couldn't. So it wound up being sort of a moot point. But it had come up at Fest, especially early Fest. It had we'd been Vard talked. Contacted us and other sort of things where, do you want to come play and whatnot? And for me, a lot of it was, as Scott had said, I don't really like seeing reunions of bands that when they kind of suck and they kind of like,
which there's great potential for.
Yeah. When like whatever good feeling and memory you had of the band is kind of like, ooh, like just leave it. Best left in the past.
Some crimes are best left unsolved.
So, and the other thing to what Chuck said is just that it like I just don't want to milk it. Like it just kind of was exactly what it should have been. Kind of one of the few things in my life that kind of it was sort of perfect in its own duration and everything. And that sort of comes to like why we broke up. And there was a very actually practical reason why we broke up.
I do want to ask because you guys were there during the early beginnings of a band like Less Than Jake. So do you have any stories from some of the shows that you had a chance to play with them or perhaps even go and see them play?
Oh,
Oh
uh,
yeah, how much time you got, man? I mean, I remember we were playing a Tuesday night when we met Krista Makes. We were playing in Gainesville, and there's probably 15 people in the club because it was a Tuesday night. Maybe there's a bit more, whatever. And then this fresh face appears in the audience. He had a mullet, and
He still
comes
does.
up to us. He's he comes up to us, and he was just so friendly and so cool and so enthusiastic, like young, energy. And it's Krista Makes. And,
he hadn't started Less Than Jake yet. Like he,
yeah, but he just moved to Gainesville and he's like, man, you guys are great. And we were just like, oh, what a nice guy. And so over time, we just became friends with them. And then I remember they finally made their way up to Tommy Hamilton's place to do their first recording. And when we saw Tommy afterwards, he's like, oh, yeah, those Les and Jake guys came up here last weekend. They did everything in one take. We're like, oh. And we knew, like, I remember when they got their stuff together, like, oh, this band's gonna go places, which they did. I mean, I literally just saw them a couple of weeks ago because my kid, who's 19-year-old young man, is a legit fan. And, Les and Jake come to town. They treat us like really great friends, and they bring us out and put us on the guest list and treat us like royalty. And so, just grateful for those guys.
Jeff, Chris, I saw Les and Jake on this tour too, and Chris remembers to the day that he saw us live. Like that date is committed to memory, and it was the same date that we had gotten together that day that they played here. And he was like, all these decades later, like it, that this is him talking, but it still means a great deal to me. And that, of course, meant the world to me. Like, who remembers a date like that? But yeah, God bless you, Chris. And Les and Jake, again, it was
Buddy, Chris, Roger, all them guys.
yeah, it like Vinny, Roger, Buddy, like it was Jessica, like
Yeah.
it fueled like we were just fueling each other. But there came a time where we played a few shows with Les and Jake around Florida. And we had a great time hanging out with them. They were just pals. And Vinny actually made the first Spoke stickers. So they were helping us out before Les and Jake was even a thing. But I remember we were playing Daytona and it was they were playing some of their newer stuff that was starting to veer into ska, and it was only me, Scott, and Chuck rocking out in the audience, and other people who were there were just in the back. And I remember thinking, like, how is everybody not fucking completely into this? Like, I was like, I was like, this is so good, and they are getting it together so well, which of course inspired me to push myself a little further, so that we could all get on a higher level, and just to see like just how well they've done. It's been fascinating and inspiring, like post spoke and other things that I've done and whatnot. I'm just so proud of them. I'm happy for them. And they're wonderful people, and I'm very interested just like what their experience has been, especially, kind of trying new things. At this last show, being like kind of backstage and looking at the audience, I was like, how many bands get this? I mean, a sold out show, kind of all ages, not just folks like us, and everybody in the audience singing the songs at top of their lungs were smiling. Everybody was smiling like crazy. I'm like, how many bands do I see? Chuck and I went to see Melvins and Napalm Death recently, and although we all had a great
Yeah,
time, we had an
yeah.
amazing time. I don't think there was a lot of smiling going on.
I was smiling the whole time.
I was smiling a lot too, especially like just in awe of some of these, of Napalm Death's, the more grindcore stuff. But just to see the happiness that Les and Jake brings people is just
Yeah.
wonderful. Like I'm amazed. So anyway,
Very, very Red House painters of them. So, and also another thought though, like with like Les and Jake, we all used to share warehouses together. work out our practice schedules and play shows together, there were different people, different bands coming up from other towns that had listened to Spoke over the years, and they came up and they were very positive and friendly and talked about us. And then they would play shows. And I'm like, damn, they might have said that we influenced them a little bit or something, like Hot Water Music, all these other bands that sounded like super talented, super nice guys. And they would play shows and fill it up. And like I think they still play, right? All these bands that just like they had longevity and like super talent. And it was always weird to hear that someone like from another town in Florida was listening to us and say, you know, they liked us and we had a little bit of an influence, something like that. And then we'd see them play and just be like, well, we must have been like that week one of them picking up their instrument or something. But we were always very appreciative to hear people give us compliments and then play shows together. I mean, the list is like hundreds long of the Florida bands that we'd play shows together. And even the touring bands, it was always just so much talent. And I always liked that everybody would, you know, hang out together and like afterwards or like even during that daytime, you know.
I think that's fantastic. There's another band too that I'm a fan of that I think you all played several shows with, Paste Eater.
Oh my gosh.
A lot
sure, of course.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any good stories of playing with them?
It was a lot of hardback memories, right? So that was a real like hardback band, right? And Rob Ray, the bass player, he played that sort of new wavy bass. He lived in the Spoke House, the Devo bass. Yeah, he lived in the Spoke House, right? So did Clay. And again, but it's sort of just they were just pals, right? All these people were just pals. So, but that Paste Eater, very much that when I hear the name, I think of the hardback.
Yeah, we played our last show together with them.
I can literally smell the King Cobra beer. Yeah,
completely. The stale King Cobra. We played our last show with them, and they were they were super great people.
Oh, yeah.
Rob Ray is one of my like favorite people on earth. He's a bassist and just amazing. Gosh, what would you say? All the programmer, industrial designer, technician. He worked for NASA for a while. Like he's just a fascinating guy. And I mean that's so cool that you know Paste Eater, Jeff. Yeah, they were. I mean, it was just a cadre of lots and lots of bands that lived nearby, or they lived at Spoke House, and that we were all just kind of doing shit together. And sometimes it was just like, remember Clay and I, like just after practice going to get like his favorite food at the time was the mashed potatoes at Popeyes. So I was like, all right, let's just go get no chicken, just the mashed potatoes. So we wound up getting like 5 of them. So, you know, for later. In case he wanted more mashed potatoes.
Of all the places to eat in that area, that's what he was going for?
That's what he's going for, man. That was Clay. Clay was hardcore into it. So,
did you guys know that was going to be your last show, though? Was it planned out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that a bittersweet moment for you guys, knowing that was the last show?
100%, of course.
Well, yeah. Scott, why don't you tell the process of like sort of why that all, you know, why it ended essentially?
Okay, if you guys don't mind, thanks. You know, you have to remember, Jeff, that this is the early 90s when Nirvana had just broke and all of these major labels were super interested in punk bands, right? And they were snapping bands up left and right. And there was this real sort of atmosphere around anything punk rock. And we knew at a certain point, it got around to us that there was a major label looking at us, and I believe it was Atlantic. And towards the end of the,
it was MCA.
Towards the end, MCA. Okay, towards the end of the tour, you know, they reached out to us, and I think they reached out through Jon. Long story short, we had to make a decision, right? Because we could either carry on with the band, but Jon and I were finishing up university, and I had secured a job prior to graduation to go teach English in Japan, right? And it was like a government program. It was a legit job. I'd studied Japanese at college and all this stuff. And so I was graduating with a job. So we had to make a decision. Do I take this job in Japan, or do we carry on with the band? And, I made the decision to go to Japan. Now, I don't know what Jon and Chuck will say. I think it was the right decision. I mean, definitely there was that absolute seductive attraction to carry on with the band. It would have been wonderful to see like where it went. But we were not going to be the next Nirvana. And I don't want to speak for the other guys, but there's nothing but a trail of bands from the 90s that got onto major labels, and then 3 years later they're done, right? We were good. And we loved what we were doing. And it would have been great to like play Europe, play international, and that probably would have happened. But I'm not sure ultimately if we would have ended up doing this as a career, right? And so we made the decision. And then Jon, I'll let you tell the tale of how we let the label know that we were politely declining their kind offer.
Well, like just in making that decision, thank you, Scott. In making that decision, like it was very clear Scott had to take this amazing opportunity and this amazing offer. From my perspective, and we'll let Chuck give his perspective because we all have sort of different takes on this. But from my perspective, it was like on one hand, like the major labels were really poaching, and we knew of bands who essentially the pressures and the creative differences about how to approach, like once they got signed by a major label, they broke up because they just started bickering and hating each other because it was just too much craziness. And of course, the major labels were, they were just looking out for themselves. There was no there was no protocol for how your band should be handling this creatively. And so I didn't like that at all. And I didn't like that they were coming into the subculture just to make money off of it. I had increasingly strong feelings about this. So I was starting to feel, as Scott was kind of considering this, that maybe we should just put this to bed in the best way possible. This was very much informed by two bands that I absolutely love to this day that did exactly that. They left, they ended their tenure at the sort of peak, and that was Big Black from Chicago and Operation Ivy. And in both cases, Big Black were like, Albini sort of famously, Steve Albini famously said, more breaking up is a good idea that more bands should consider. And so Big Black sort of cemented their place. They never had any time to suck. Operation Ivy did the same thing, and for various reasons. And I was lucky enough to be at their last show, and it was like, I mean, it was sort of life changing, and it was one of those concerts that like made an enormous impression forever. So I had a high opinion of bands that broke up at their peak already. But then when we're getting, between that, Scott's offer, and then getting, these kind of letters and whatnot from majors, and they'd be like, "Oh, we saw your review in Alternative Press, and we're very interested." And so MCA were like, "Can you please send us your 7-inch, and we'll listen to it and A&R stuff, whatever." And I was like, "They don't give a fuck about us. They don't. They're just they saw a good review in something and are trying to make are interested in making some money." So I was eating lunch. I was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I got an envelope, and I included their letter, and on the back of it, I said, "Thank you for your interest. We respectfully decline to send you a 7-inch for your review, but here's some lunch instead." And I addressed the letter and then shoved the fucking peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the envelope and sealed it and went outside and put it in the mailbox to back to MCA. So that's it was already seeping through the envelope by the time I sent it. So I hope MCA got that sandwich. That's how I felt about it. I didn't consult these guys at all about it either. Maybe that was kind of a dick move, but I was like, we're not fucking doing this. So I hope they enjoyed their lunch.
How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, what's your take, man?
40 years later, can I do this? I wanted
Yes.
to be a rocker.
Yes.
I wanted to have some records and studio time. I wanted to be on tour.
That's fair.
No, it went out with a bang. It went out properly. Of course, I wanted to play music for a living. I didn't have what these guys had, which was like a great degree from college and opportunities elsewhere. I wanted to go the rock route, but I understand where their minds were. I mean, we've grown up together, so I knew that. I'm not surprised. Continued to play in other bands afterwards, but never quite the same experience, obviously. But yeah, I would have loved an opportunity to continue to play. But yeah, I understand the major label just kind of milking bands in the 90s just when it's, everything was hitting. I get that part. But man, just the idea of doing it for a living and having a blast. And at the same time, I'm sure there are some bands that are having a blast, and does it become work for them? Does it become less fun? I don't know. I would have loved to have found out. I had a lot of fun playing with these two, and to do that in more towns, that would have been great. I kind of felt like at the 3-year mark, like we were really starting to get breath and evolve, and it could have gotten better and better. I kind of felt that way, but I understood, Scott's opportunities, so I couldn't be mad about it. When I look back, nowadays, those, like I've already mentioned, glory days, I didn't want it to end. I still wish it wouldn't have ended, but at the same time, Scott's, went to Japan, met his wife. They did the same thing, teaching English, and with Australia and London. All kinds of great things. And Jon, he moved to Chicago. Well, you were in Gainesville for a little bit longer and saw the shifting and changing of things in Gainesville, but moved to Chicago and had great experiences. So we've all gone our different routes. And, I think Scott played in a band, The Agents, in London.
I did.
Jon, did you play in any other bands, like outright bands, other than just kind of by yourself?
No, because it's interesting. When I came to Chicago, it was the scene was so kind of codified and saturated to some degree. And I'd try to I'd play with people and sort of see how it goes. But to be honest, I had sort of run through my ideas of everything that kind of I wanted to do in Spoke. So I didn't have a whole lot of ideas to sort of start fresh. And nobody was nearly as fun and nearly as cool and nearly as awesome as Scott and Chuck to play with for me. I mean, I love playing with these guys. And even when going over at Chuck, we still lock in like real easy, So I never locked in with anybody. And sometimes, man, big city, they were, kind of jagoffs. Like I was like, I don't want to be in a band with this person. I want to be in a band with friends. So in that way, maybe Spoke spoiled me because I had two of my best friends my very best friends that I was in a band with, and they remain so. And that's why I feel so lucky. But I will say, Jeff, that and Chuck, this is a good time to publicly say that I'm sorry that we didn't go that route because it became clear. It's when you went and saw Interpol and Chuck knew who's in Interpol, who's in Gainesville, Chuck again?
Sam, the drummer.
Sam, that's right, Sam.
Sam Bulgarino?
And
yeah.
And
he was in the Holy Terrors in Miami.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and was he in Gus? What band
he was in Gus too.
Yeah. So it was after Chuck. I couldn't go see Interpol. I really wanted to, but Chuck telling me like, God, imagine how great it was that they're able to have this level of sustenance and touring and whatnot, and I could hear that was something that you would have. A goal that you would have wanted to go for. So Chuck, I'm sorry we weren't good enough to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, mate.
Good enough guitarist. If you had been the drummer for Interpol, then you totally could have done that. So
I appreciate each of you really sharing your perspectives on that situation, and we can only imagine what could have happened. And I think about two major label releases, one from Jawbreaker on Geffen, Dear You, and Sam I Am Clumsy on Atlantic. Like those are two of my personal favorite albums. And although they were on majors, I feel like both bands did something a little different on both of those releases. So I kind of wonder what would have happened with Spoke if that
Yeah.
would have happened too.
I think we
Yeah.
were better. Well, we would have had more time to play some songs, but like bigger production, perhaps. Maybe it would have sounded better. Maybe it would have been a good experience. The thing that kills me is I just wonder what if we had like 2 weeks in a studio where it sounded bigger. What if Antihistamine sounded like bombastic, and it already did, but even give it bigger production. There's a part of me that just wishes or wonders, like what if we re-recorded it? Yeah, now we sound like Sha Na Na, but at the time, all these decades later, I'm still thinking, that stuff could have even sounded different, like maybe we could add some other ideas. I don't know. We've continued to keep seeing bands and listen to music that influences us. Maybe we would have incorporated some of that stuff, but also part of me says, you know what? We had the 3-year run. It was a great time. We went out the right way, and that's good. That's fine. So
yeah, we received more than we deserved, and I remember as well. We became quite close with Jawbox, right? And so Jawbox became kind of like mentors to us, and I don't even know how we were so lucky that happened. Aside from they were just nice guys, but we played DC with them. They'd come to Gainesville, and we just kind of befriended these people. And we saw the inner machinations of what it was like going through that label experience. And it kind of freaked me out, to be honest. I was like, that was weird, man. Like, because they got kind of like business-like about it and stuff. But at the end of the day, I think there was still some juice left in us, for sure, right? For sure. We could have definitely gone and we would have gotten tighter. We would have probably, really polished stuff off, and we would have played internationally. But, there's a famous samurai maxim: the best time to leave a party is when it's nearing its height. So, there's a purity to it that is kind of a treasure to me.
I like to think of all these samurais at a party, like leaving like right before it gets really. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Scott, in terms of we received more than we deserved. And all I know, I don't think too much about it, to be honest, in terms of being on a major label. I love things like Touch and Go and Discord and Merge and things like
Yeah,
this.
but we probably, we could have probably done
really
something there.
like that stay true to the roots and true to their, I mean, I hate to put like business model, but they make it, they're independent. And all I know is that if we had continued in an effort to get better, the one thing I can say for sure is Chuck would have had to sing more, because he was like the one guy singing our band.
well,
You didn't want to. You didn't want to sing more. That's the thing.
yeah. Well, we would have been a pop.
I mean, oh, sorry, Chuck. Go ahead, mate.
We would have been a pop band. You mentioned Andy Gibb earlier. We would have sounded like that. Shadow dancing.
Oh my God.
Part of my brain.
Dancing, yes, good one, dude.
But I think that last show, Jeff, you brought up the last show. Did we know it was the last show? Yeah, we knew it was the last show. It was curated like that, and it was with Paste Eater and Radon, and it was at the back lot of the Hardback, which held like, I don't know, 500 people or something, and it was packed. It was packed, and it was like a poetic, sublime way to go out, because it was everyone that we loved was there, plus more, right? Like people that liked us that maybe we didn't even know came all across from Florida because they knew, oh, this is Spoke's last show. And it was a great show. It really was. I remember it was very emotional, right? Even at that young age. And at the end of the show, we played one of the first songs we had ever made that we never usually played live, but we played it on that show. And for me personally, it was, like there were some emotions there because I love these guys, right? And we had done something so special. And at the same time, I have this adventure on the horizon looming. So I'm like this mixture of sort of like moving on to my next chapter, but I'm also leaving all of this behind. It was, it was very sweet. It was very, very beautiful moment. And the show was great, and people went nuts, right? They just went bananas. And what a way to go out.
Yeah, we ended on a song that we tried recording live, but just didn't really capture. It was a super emo song. I mean, that's a whole other thing, is that we were very much tagged as emo before emo was a thing. Like it was
Right.
Rites of Spring sort of embrace feeling emo, not like what would become, I don't know, what, Dashboard Confessional or whatever emo turned into. But it was just funny. We thought it was very in jest, but we had some songs that we really, dug deep, and we ended on that one, and then we kind of smashed our instruments at the end, and a real show of catharsis, and everybody seemed to really get it and seemed to have a good time. Chuck, did Aho play as well? Did Les and Jake and Aho play that show?
Yeah, I think there was quite a few bands that got up there and
Yeah,
played.
yeah, but I think our friends band that we hadn't, I don't know if I had seen them before, and these were other friends that we grew up with in high school. Trey and Jack, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they were really cool, like a little bit more, almost what would be, I feel like it would be like kind of considered like, would later be considered sort of post rock or whatnot. Like they were definitely ahead of the curve, and this band Ajo, which means garlic in Spanish, which I loved that name. Anyway. That's my take on that. So,
I think you all really just segued into the legacy of Spoke. When you think holistically of the band's journey from the early days, as you mentioned, just being friends, going to shows in Orlando, and then heading up further north to Gainesville, what would you say for each of you is the legacy of Spoke?
We left our footprints. We came in there at a great time. We had a lot of fun, and people saw that you can come to this town and have a lot of fun and play. It wasn't a big city. It was a town surrounded by academics, sports, music. It was cheap and easy living. I had the most fun living in Gainesville. It's just a great town. And I think other people saw, hey, this is a great town to move to and start a band. And like everybody was doing it. And it worked out really well. And some people appreciated what we did. Some people liked some of the songs. Some people probably thought we were totally amateur, which we were. And we were okay with that. We were okay that we weren't complicated. We weren't writing sophisticated songs with a ton of changes or anything like that. I mean, I was totally cool with how it all went down. I didn't expect it. I was happy to get out of Orlando and have a new opportunity in Gainesville, and I was with my friends, and I met a bunch of other awesome, great people during all that time. And the band was 3 years of hard work and great times and opportunities I never thought I would have had. I thought we sounded pretty good. It's not for everybody. We weren't super talented. We didn't have like great vocals and super skilled instrumentalists, but we just smiled when we did it, and we went out with a smile, and I'm content with that. I gave John some shit there about sending the sandwich because I would like opportunities to do that, but
fair enough.
yeah, but I mean overall it was wonderful, and I'm glad that like the way things worked out for Scott is perfect. It's perfect for him.
Well stated, dude.
And
Thanks,
from
Chuck.
all our lives turned out the way they did. And I miss some things about it. I look back nostalgically all the time about it, but it all happened for reasons that, not always happy about. But I'd have to say there's a few songs that we played that I listen to now that I get, the goosebumps that Scott was talking about earlier. 80% is by far my favorite song that we did. That song when the drums kick in and Scott comes in with the bass and it just thumps. And, that song is great. I like that song. And Antihistamine's pretty cool and different. Was a real bitch to play. But yeah, all those songs that I really, really love, I love. And then there's some real crappers that we had. And that
We had some.
we had some crappers, but I'm still super thankful that we had the opportunities that we did this, that these guys got me involved and shaped my whole life, because when they moved me up there, I didn't know what my life was going to be like. And it took off. From day one, it took off, and I'm super happy about it. So,
Chuck, I love
guys,
that. Thanks, dude. Scott, what's your thoughts, man?
Well, I mean, our legacy. That's a big highfalutin word for Spoke, but it's it's all born from just the people we love, right? And the people that supported us and the community that we worked amongst, and then also our own hard work. I think it's pretty weird that we still have some kind of resonance to this day. Like we're online here with you, Jeff. I mean, I'm so grateful and humbled. And I mean, I'll give you a story. I live out near San Francisco, and there's a very famous record store out here called Amoeba. And this is kind of a perfect spoke story. Um, I was in Amoeba. This is a few years ago, and I'm sitting there just sort of looking through records. I can't remember why I was there because I don't even have a record player anymore. But I like going to record stores, and I
Yep.
hear these two people next to me talking, and I'm really super nosy, right? I'm a terrible eavesdropper. And I hear these two people talking, a little bit younger than me, two fellas. And one of them's looking at a Hot Water Music album, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Hot Water Music, man, I love this band, whatever." Yeah, and then the other guy goes, "Yeah, yeah, I like it too, but I really like that real old, that true old Gainesville stuff, like Spoken Radon." And I was like that. My freaking ear was like, "Whoa!" Like I don't know these people, right, at all, but there to hear that, I was just like, "What? How does this happen?" Like that's so magical to me, and then uh, I was in Amoeba, and just for the hell of it, I went into like the bargain bin and I saw like one of our 7 inches for like $1. So that's a perfect kind of spoke, you know, life cycle. But yeah, that's just and it's all due to just the wonderful benevolence that our friends and community and then our own work put in. So just grateful, just so grateful. And
Yeah.
thank you, Jeff, for this.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
The only thing I'd have to add, if y'all don't mind, is that I mean, and thank you, Scott and Chuck, for like those were super eloquent sort of, just overviews of kind of like of how we hold it, right, Jeff? But like I honestly don't know what our legacy is, and I don't really think about it too much. I do know, per what Chuck was saying, every about once a year I'll listen to our stuff, and mostly while I'll hear mistakes, I'll also hear moments. It's moments I'm like, oh, we actually kind of pulled this together. Like that actually kind of worked out. And then there are other moments I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I
Mhm.
hope nobody ever listens to this. But I guess there are three things that I would say, if you'll indulge me, that I'm proud of for us, or I'm happy with is probably a better way to put it. I'm most happy with is that thinking back that, we being of modest abilities, Chuck being less modest abilities, he's a good drummer, but the three of us being of modest musical abilities, we really pushed ourselves creatively as hard as we possibly could. Like we took whatever influences that we could, and without being like, oh, here's our reggae song and here's our, thrash song or something like that. We didn't do that. It was more like, how can we pull it all together and then make these things, kind of mutate them, evolve them, and make it our own. And we were very kind of deliberate about that. And we really did our goddamnedest to make something that was to just bringing the music playing in our heads into reality, and that's something I'm happy we pushed ourselves enough that hard with. The other is that that with all these other friends and bands and people and people making zines and people doing all sorts of artistic things, that we contributed a little bit to this burgeoning subculture in Gainesville. Again, right place, right time, right people, but that we had that it became this really creative and robust scene. And you know this, Jeff, because clearly you are a great connoisseur of these things, but a lot of the greatest stuff is so under the radar that came out in Gainesville, as it is everywhere, right? There's so much great stuff. Friends that put out one 7 inch, they're in a band for 6 months, and it's like one of my favorites, or something like that. But if I'm being honest, again, not knowing about legacy and that being all so long ago, I'm very happy with how, like, I love that, Fest became a thing. So many good bands have come out of Gainesville. Varspat, so many good records. But if I'm being honest, this is a little bit maybe selfish, but the thing I'm happiest with, no, and I'm getting emotional here, but is that, like, I have these guys as my best friends. I don't have any siblings, and they're my brothers, and they will always be, and I love them to death. And being in a band, like, didn't change that at all. And we know plenty of bands where that, I mean, history is rife with bands where that is not the case, that the people don't talk to each other again. And we're as close as I feel like we ever were. And that's everything to me. So
Thank you, John, and everyone, Chuck, Scott, for sharing just what it meant to you. And how amazing is it to even be sitting here now talking to you three, doing this episode, because it has been so long since Spoke was a band that was actively recording and playing shows. So just to be sitting here with you three right now and to be telling this story, going as way back as we had gone to the final show, I can't thank you enough for coming on. So, and I admire the relationships that you've had with each other for all these years, because that is not easy, especially when you are living in other states, different time zones and what have you, and to be able to stay connected in some way and to maintain that, I think is super amazing. So just thank you for being such fantastic guests, and it's been a pleasure having you on.
It's
Thank
our
you.
absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for having any interest in our old band, and for investing your time and your podcast, which is amazing.
Thank you.
And really, like, unbelievably thorough and whatnot. Yeah, we're honored to be here, and thank you, Scott and Chuck, and I love you guys, and yeah, I couldn't be happier to have done this.
I appreciate it. And
100%.
as we get ready to close things out, I would like to just give each of you just the last word. Any final thoughts you'd like to share to the folks out there, fans, supporters alike? The floor is yours to take us home, whoever is going to kick that off.
Go ahead, guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the platform and the ability. I can tell you just personally, it's just been wonderful to talk about these things again, and to have the opportunity to revisit some wonderful days. And it's quite unique that I'm still like best pals with these two fellas that are on here for this interview. And Jeff, thank you so much for allowing us to tell a little bit of a story about three kids from Orlando.
Chuck, what do you got?
I would say anybody out there that likes to tinker around with some instruments with their friends, do it. Have some fun. I think we had maybe one or two disagreements in our 3 years of playing, and that's pretty great for a band. Like we saw it as three friends that had a great opportunity, and we took advantage of those opportunities and enjoyed the heck out of it. There's nothing to change, nothing that we would want to change about it. It was just a great experience. Even the crazy, weird experiences that we're not talking about here, and read John's book for some of that. We had an amazing time, and I'm just really thankful that 30-something years later, I could tell my kids about it, whether they listen to that or not. Just my daughter thinks it's totally cool, and that's cool. That means something right there, Dad was in a band, and she wanted her mother to make a T-shirt for her, and she has a Spoke T-shirt that she wears, and that stuff's awesome. So it's taken a different path. And so I'm proud of a lot of it. There's some times where I listen to a little bit of it and it's kind of embarrassing. But then there's some times I get the goosebumps and say that was really, really good. And so I encourage anybody out there just to do the same thing. I did that where I got behind the instrument and I wasn't very good, and I just had fun. And it doesn't have to be serious, and you don't have to get signed to a major label and send a sandwich or any of that stuff. Just have some fun and do it with your friends. And that's what I did. I'm happy.
You don't have to send a sandwich. It's true.
Eat
I don't even know if major labels contact people like that anymore. I mean, things are so different now. But I think one thing that's not different, and you totally took the words out of my mouth, Chuck, is like, yeah, if you want to start a band, start a band. And like with your friends, particularly, like just make noise with your friends. Like I'm glad that people are still doing that together with like actual instruments and whatnot and making a big ass racket. And I think most importantly, one of the great things about punk rock is not to have really any expectation per se, or at least what punk rock used to be, not to have too much expectation. And just once you get your shit together, if you like it, being like, well, take it or leave it. This is us. Like we're not out to please the whole world with this. I mean, that's one of the greatest lessons of punk rock, I think. But if you have friends as good as Scott and Chuck were friends to me, then and you want to try to make music together, even if you don't know how to play your instruments, I think you should. And I'd even like to hear it. So.